Chapter 426. Early in the morning, Han Yunxi received Empress Dowager Li's verbal summons. She didn't need to think to know why the Empress Dowager had summoned her to the palace at this critical juncture. If this was any other time, she'd definitely refuse, but this time was different. She hadn't left the house for almost a month, so how could she miss such a good chance to go for a stroll? Would Long Fei Yi know when she reported to the Empress Dowager and left the palace for a stroll? Han Yunxi was in a good mood and changed into a set of beautiful clothes. But Long Fei Yi arrived before she even left the house. "Your Highness, the Empress Dowager has summoned Qinxia to the palace." "Forgive me for not accompanying you," Han Yunxi spoke first. But Long Fei Yi only said, "Your lordship wants to go to the palace as well. Let's go together." Han Yunxi felt stifled. Long Fei Yi must be doing this on purpose, right? He hated going to the palace. Even when Emperor Tianhui summoned him, he never showed up on time. Why was he so eager today? "Your Highness, are you going to the palace for business?" Han Yunxi asked deliberately. "Emichim, Northern Li's southern cities' horse farms have broken out in a large-scale horse plague. There's already news of the three-way battlefield's troops retreating. His Majesty summoned your lordship to the palace to discuss the matter." Although Long Fei Yi's tone was calm, Han Yunxi was stunned. She had been wondering why Long Fei Yi was so certain that Northern Li wouldn't attack first, but now she understood. As it turned out, Long Fei Yi's power had infiltrated Northern Li's horse farms. This was a serious matter. Northern Li country had three famous horse farms: Southern City, Great City, and Skypool Horse Farms. All three specialized in raising war horses for the imperial court and held important positions in Northern Li and Cloud Realm continent. Although Southern City's horse farms weren't the most important source of horses, it was enough to affect Northern Li's armored cavalry. Moreover, the most frightening thing was that the current outbreak was none other than a horse plague. In Northern Li, where horses outnumbered people, a large-scale horse plague wouldn't just cause losses to the war horses, but countless herding horses as well. That was directly related to the livelihood of the Northern Li country. Han Yunxi looked at Long Fei Yi for a long time before she asked, "Nandu Stud Farm had an epidemic for a long time, but it hasn't been publicized, right?" The Northern Li Emperor's deployment of troops at the three-way battlefield was nothing more than a bluff to scare Tianhui. Long Fei Yi nodded. "So, you have people at Nandu Racecourse?" Han Yunxi asked again. It was unlikely that the horse plague was man-made. Long Fei Yi was so certain that he must have received the news a long time ago. Long Fei Yi did not deny it and nodded again. This was his gift to Emperor Tianhui. Once Northern Li withdrew its troops, the Bailey Navy could continue to protect Fishery Island. Emperor Tianhui would have no other reason to mobilize the Bailey Navy. "Jun Xia, even if I have to use the entire navy to trap you for the rest of your life, I will not hesitate." Han Yunxi looked at Long Fei Yi with reverence in her eyes. After all, Northern Li's three major horse farms were even more strictly guarded than the imperial palace. All of their staff were hereditary and couldn't be recruited from outside. Moreover, it was very difficult for news from the farms to leak out. It took a long time for someone to infiltrate the horse farms and obtain news of the epidemic before it broke out. In other words, Long Fei Yi had started making plans in Northern Li a long time ago. Seeing Han Yunxi spacing out, Long Fei Yi stroked her bangs and asked, "Still not leaving?" Han Yunxi chuckled. "Your Highness, that bet, it looks like I won." He'd said that if she won, he'd take her to Tianshan Kenzo to broaden her horizons. Long Fei Yi's hand stiffened as he held Han Yunxi's hand. "Don't worry, there'll be a day when I take you there." Qinxia will remember. Han Yunxi didn't feel guilty at all. This time, Han Yunxi didn't bring Zhao Mama with her to the palace. Instead, she brought Su Xiaoyu with her. Ever since Han Yunshi had taught her a lesson on the nightstand, Su Xiaoyu had become much more taciturn. In front of the Duke of Qin, she was even more timid and silent. Long Fei Yi wasn't so idle as to pay attention to a servant girl, but Xiao Mama spoke up instead. "Esteemed Wang Fei, why don't this old servant go with you? I'm taking this girl into the palace to meet someone," Han Yunshi said in a low voice. Su Xiaoyu grew curious. "Who?" "You'll know when we get there," Han Yunshi pretended to be mysterious. Actually, Su Xiaoyu knew that the person she was going to meet was none other than Chu Qingge, who had bullied her at the inn. Her master was Chu Tianyin, but Chu Qingge had no idea. The inn wasn't a coincidence, but an arrangement arranged by her master. Now that Chu Qingge had married into the palace and her master had long arrived in the capital, she didn't even dare to see him without completing her mission. What a melancholy! Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi walked together while Su Xiaoyu carefully followed behind them. Who could read her thoughts? When they reached the palace, Long Fei Yi headed for the imperial study while Han Yunshi headed for the Empress Dowager's palace of heaven and earth. Before they parted, he said, "We'll go back together in a bit." Han Yunshi's hopes of sneaking out to play died just like that. By the time Han Yunshi arrived at the palace of heaven and earth, all of the concubines in the imperial harem were already present. This reminded Han Yunshi of her first visit to the palace. Unfortunately, things had changed, but the people had changed. The Empress Dowager sat at the head of the table. To her left was no longer the Empress, but the favored noble consort Shui. Next to noble consort Shui was the Crown Prince consort, Mu Luiyue. To the Empress Dowager's right was noble consort Ning. The seat behind noble consort Ning was empty. Without a doubt, Chu Qingge hadn't arrived yet. With Han Yunshi's status, she was at least on equal footing with the four noble consorts, but there was no place for her in the room. Han Yunshi had long gotten used to this sort of show of strength, so she felt uneasy when Empress Dowager Li left her a seat. After the greetings, Empress Dowager Li granted her a seat while Gue Mama placed a chair next to Mu Luiyue. Han Yunshi didn't get angry, but sat there calmly. Her aura didn't lose out to anyone else in the room. How could Han Yunshi not understand Empress Dowager Li's thoughts? She glanced at the few people in the upper seats, and everything became clear to her. Noble consort Shui by Empress Dowager Li's side was a concubine-born daughter of the Li clan. Although she was favored, she'd never be able to become empress due to the taint of the Li clan's corruption. She only had the right to compete with Chu Qingge for favor, not the empress's position. Now that Chu Qingge was here, Empress Dowager Li's greatest fear was that she'd steal the throne. The empress had gone mad and the Li clan had fallen, but the Empress Dowager was still here. The Crown Prince still needed to solidify his position as Crown Prince. As long as there was no empress in the imperial harem, the Empress Dowager could rule for one more day. If Chu Qingge really did take the empress's position, then it was only right and proper for the empress to rule the 6 palaces. Empress Dowager Li might as well learn from Grand Concubine Yi and become vegetarian and pray to Buddha. Han Yunshi withdrew her gaze and glanced at Mu Luiyue next to her. As the Crown Prince's consort, Mu Luiyue was very likely to be the future empress. She and Chu Qingge had a battle for the empress's position as well. If Chu Qingge became empress and gave birth to a prince, then the Crown Prince's position would be threatened. The struggle for power in the imperial harem and the women's struggles for favor were all inextricably linked and complicated. But none of that had anything to do with Han Yunshi. She wasn't an imperial consort of the imperial harem, but the Duke of Qin's only consort. Empress Dowager Li had invited her here so she could fight with Chu Qingge so she could sit back and reap the benefits. Han Yunshi could admit that she disliked Chu Qingge very much, but she was only here to watch the show. She had no plans to get involved in the muddy waters of the imperial harem. Han Yunshi picked up her teacup and slowly tasted it, allowing the Empress Dowager, noble consort Shui, and Mu Luiyue to chat and laugh without a word. Soon enough, an announcement came from outside. Noble consort Chu has arrived. Chu Qingge was dressed splendidly as she entered, her long, flowery dress trailing behind her. Two servant girls followed her on her left, while an old eunuch supported her on her right. She was almost as beautiful as Empress Li in the past. Needless to say, such a delicate and pretty woman had a different kind of charm in her gorgeous palace robes. But Chu Qingge probably hadn't been doing well over the past 6 months, because she'd lost a lot of weight. Han Yunshi was a very naughty girl. The more she looked at Chu Qingge, the more she felt that Emperor Tianhui would definitely like her. It was only her second day in the palace, but she'd already put on such airs when paying respects to the Empress Dowager. Empress Dowager Li only felt displeased in her heart at the sight, but maintained her amiable expression. Noble consort Chu, hurry and rise. Come to me so I can take a good look. Han Yunshi smiled coldly. Hadn't Empress Dowager Li said the same thing when she'd come to pay respects? Chu Qingge went to sit next to Empress Dowager Li, but her resentful gaze rested on Han Yunshi. Today's meeting had nothing to do with Han Yunshi, right? What's she doing here? Is she here to laugh at me? Empress Dowager Li took her hand and examined her closely. She couldn't help but sigh with emotion. No wonder His Majesty likes you. There's no other woman in the imperial harem who looks better than you. Chu Qingge was a proud woman, so she didn't try to be modest. She only smiled slightly. Han Yunshi smiled as well. The Empress Dowager's exaggerated words had made Chu Qingge an enemy and offended all the women in the imperial harem. Noble consort Shui grinned. Muhu, there's no other woman in the imperial harem with more dowry than noble consort Chu. Before Chu Qingge married into the imperial harem, her older brother Chu Tianyin had already analyzed the intricacies of Tianning's imperial harem with her. He'd also made it clear that her mission was to take the position of empress. She was very clear on the Empress Dowager and noble consort Shui's intentions. She was about to strike back when Mu Luiyue suddenly spoke up. There's no other woman with no dowry either, is there? No dowry? Is there such a thing? The Empress Dowager was puzzled. Imperial grandmother, Qin Wangfei doesn't have a dowry either, right? If you compare people, you'll die. If you compare goods, you'll throw them away. There's no point in comparing things like that. Let's talk about something else. Han Yunshi was sitting right next to her, but Mu Luiyue didn't hold back at all. Instead, she laughed out loud, a bit too provocative. Needless to say, her eloquence had improved quite a bit. Her words had both insulted Han Yunshi and helped Chu Qingge out of her predicament. Unfortunately, Han Yunshi didn't budge. If she was so easily provoked, she wouldn't be Han Yunshi. Empress Dowager Li and noble consort Shui exchanged meaningful glances without speaking. Chu Qingge was puzzled. What does Mu Luiyue mean by this? What's her stance? Is she going to help me? Chu Qingge knew that Han Yunshi had played Mu Luiyue until she was infamous for it. Although her older brother had told her over and over again not to clash with Han Yunshi, she still couldn't swallow the anger in her heart. She would cooperate well with her older brother to take the position of empress, but she wouldn't let Han Yunshi off the hook either. No dowry. That can't be, right? Chu Qingge couldn't help but look towards Han Yunshi. Han Yunshi was too lazy to pay attention to such a boring topic. She kept drinking her tea and didn't say a word. Let's see how Mu Luiyue keeps up this act. Chapter 427. Regardless of whether it was Mu Luiyue or Chu Qingge, discussing the dowry in front of Han Yunshi was like pointing a finger at Han Yunshi's nose to humiliate her. Everyone assumed that Han Yunshi and the two upstarts of the imperial harem would have a catfight, but Han Yunshi remained indifferent. Let him be strong, I'll be the cool breeze that brushes over the hills. Let him be tyrannical, I'll be the bright moon that shines over the great river. Han Yunshi was currently wearing a light smile on her face. She liked crowds, but she'd never allow herself to be the center of attention. Han Yunshi didn't reply, leaving Chu Qingge in an awkward position. She was about to answer her own question when Mu Luiyue immediately gave her a way out of the situation. Mu Luiyue grinned. Do you even need to ask? I didn't see anyone carrying the dowry in the bridal procession. Everyone in the capital saw it. Mu Luiyue had been waiting for this day for a long time. She'd long thrown caution to the wind. She'd had enough of being a widow in the Eastern Palace. Her title as Crown Prince Consort was limitless, but only she knew the true pain. Even if the Crown Prince ascended the throne in the future, she could use her maternal family's influence to protect her position as Crown Prince Consort and become Empress. So what? Her days would still be bitter. Her only thought now was that since Han Yunshi had ruined her, she'd ruin Han Yunshi as well. Joining hands with Chu Qingge was her best choice. As long as she helped Chu Qingge today and left her with a good impression, it'd be much easier to work with her in the future. Han Yunshi wouldn't speak, would she? She'd force her until she did. Mu Luiyue purposely turned towards Han Yunshi and asked loudly, Imperial Qin Aunt, you wouldn't be afraid to admit it, would you? Chu Qingge had just married into the Eastern Palace, after all, so she still restrained herself. Mu Luiyue's straightforward approach was like a fight to the death. How frightening. Everyone turned to look at Han Yunshi. Many of them were inexplicably nervous. Han Yunshi slowly finished the tea in her cup and elegantly put down the cup. Then she said, What's there to be afraid of? I really don't have a dowry. Marrying your highness is already your highness's honor. Why do I need a dowry? As soon as these words were spoken, the originally quiet hall became even quieter. Even the sound of a needle falling to the ground could be heard. Mu Luiyue was flabbergasted, while Chu Qingge was gaping. Neither of them could speak. Han Yunshi really didn't want to stir up the muddy waters of the harem, but she had no choice. Since the other party had forced her to the front, she could only fight the cheap with cheap. As the saying goes, a cheap person is invincible. Empress Dowager Li's faction was waiting for her to tear into Chu Qingge, while Chu Qingge was waiting for her to tear into Empress Dowager Li's faction. She chose to offend the Duke of Qin and use His Highness Duke of Qin as a shield. As for whether His Highness Duke of Qin would bite her, that was a private matter between the two of them. Chu Qingge was the first to react. She couldn't take it anymore and raged, Aren't you being too self-righteous? Han Yunshi smiled and looked towards the Empress Dowager. Esteemed Empress Dowager, you're the one who bestowed Yunshi to His Highness. Isn't it His Highness's honor to receive your gift? Some people say that Yunshi is self-righteous. What do you think? Han Yunshi was simply a genius. In a few words, she tossed the problem to Empress Dowager Li. The Empress Dowager was caught off guard and didn't know how to respond. If she refuted Han Yunshi, then she'd be trampling on her own face and admitting that she wasn't as honorable as the Duke of Qin. If she obeyed Han Yunshi, then she'd be humiliating Chu Qingge too directly. Empress Dowager Li racked her brains and came up with no solution. In the end, she could only reluctantly end the conversation as a peacemaker. All right. Let's not talk about such trifles. So speaking, she took Chu Qingge's hand and grinned. Women, whether they marry into a commoner's family or the imperial clan, all they want is to be doted on. Noble Consort Chu, His Majesty dotes on you the most now. He's given you double the amount of jewelry and satin. Even this servant gets double the amount. Empress Dowager Li laughed out loud. Plenty of people have come to pay respects to me, but you're the only one who looks like a noble consort. It looked like praise, but it was actually flattery to kill. Chu Qingge's eyes flashed with anger. Big brother was right. This old Empress Dowager had the most venomous tongue in the imperial harem. Her mouth was honey-tongued and her belly was filled with swords. Her tongue was soft, but her heart was sharp. She was the one who should be on guard against her the most. If it wasn't for Big Brother's warning, she would have been fooled by the old Empress Dowager without knowing that their positions were in conflict. Chu Qingge was about to reply when Mu Luiyue spoke up again. Imperial grandmother is right. A noble consort should act like a noble consort. A Wang Fei should act like a Wang Fei as well. Especially those who've come to pay respects. Those who dress casually and bring in a child are disrespectful to you. Mu Luiyue's words turned everyone's attention back to Han Yunxi. All of the women present were dressed in dignified palace robes. Their attendants were all senior female attendants from the various palaces, but Han Yunxi was the only one present. Her clothes were beautiful, but she wasn't wearing a single piece of jewelry. Moreover, the servant girl she'd brought with her was a little brat. There were plenty of servant girls of this age in the palace, but none of them had the right to serve in such a setting. Han Yunxi felt helpless as she drank tea to relieve her boredom. She discovered that Mu Luiyue hated her even more than she thought. Chu Qingge looked at Mu Luiyue with a complicated gaze. The Empress Dowager had been making enemies for her and mocking her in secret, but Mu Luiyue kept shifting the topic to Han Yunxi to find fault with Han Yunxi. Although Mu Luiyue was the crown prince's consort and stood on the opposite side of her, she could still meet this Mu Luiyue in private today. Since the trouble had shifted from her to Han Yunxi, Chu Qingge wouldn't miss the chance. She smiled and said, I wouldn't have noticed if the crown prince consort hadn't mentioned it. Doesn't Qin Wangfei have any proper servants by her side to serve her? Han Yunxi followed up with an and said, Noble consort Chu, you really are forgetful. Chu Qingge was completely lost. What do you mean? Han Yunxi purposely pulled Su Xiaoyu out of the way. Noble consort Chu, this girl was originally a beggar. When she begged you at the inn, you gave her a generous slap. Have you forgotten? Han Yunxi had brought Su Xiaoyu here today just so she could let Su Xiaoyu see her enemy and remember her. She wasn't planning to do anything else. But Chu Qingge had slapped her and forgotten all about her. She really needed to remind her properly. I brought her here today just to thank you for your kindness. If you hadn't given her that slap back then, I wouldn't have softened my heart and taken her into the estate to serve me, Han Yunxi smiled. Su Xiaoyu never expected Han Yunxi to play like this. Although she was one of Chu Tiannin's people, she'd never liked her master's cold and aloof little sister. She liked Han Yunxi's way of playing. Su Xiaoyu quickly stepped forward and kowtowed. Su Xiaoyu thanks noble consort Chu for the grace of that slap. May noble consort Chu live thousands and thousands of years. Her earnest expression and respectful gestures made many of the people present laugh at her misfortune. Was there anything more ironic than this? Noble consort Chu was extremely narrow-minded. Not only did she not pity the beggar, she even hit her. The dignified eldest young miss of the Chu clan, Tianning's noblewoman, was bickering with a little beggar. It was truly laughable and lamentable. Most likely, news of this would spread quickly throughout the imperial harem and out of the palace itself. Chu Qingge's face had turned completely black. Of course she remembered what had happened at the inn, but she only remembered how badly Mu Ling and Han Yunxi had played her. If her big brother hadn't saved the day, she would have stripped Mu Ling of her clothes by now. As for the little beggar who'd been beaten up, she didn't remember what he looked like or his name. Su Xiaoyu was so sincere in thanking her that she couldn't explain, deny, or apologize. As soon as she did, Han Yunshi would definitely reveal everything about her. As for apologizing, how could she possibly do that? Han Yunshi's flattery to death was many times better than Empress Dowager Li's. Even if her heart was filled with reluctance, Chu Qingge still had to say 3 words to Su Xiaoyu. You may rise. Seeing Chu Qingge's expression change at the sight of Han Yunshi, the Empress Dowager and noble consort Shui exchanged satisfied glances. This was the scene they'd wanted to see the most. Unexpectedly, Han Yunshi suddenly rose to her feet and said seriously, Esteemed Empress Dowager, Qinxia also thinks that noble consort Chu is the most proper noble consort. It's a pity that there's someone sitting here who doesn't take her seriously. As Qinxia sees it, she should be punished. Since Han Yunshi had already torn apart Chu Qingge, why wouldn't she tear apart the Empress Dowager's faction as well? She was a true centrist. Either she didn't defend either side, or she'd offend both thoroughly. No one would be able to stand aside and watch her make a fool of herself. Nonsense, who has the guts to do that? Noble consort Shui refuted immediately. She didn't want Han Yunshi to change the subject. You! Han Yunshi pointed at her. Noble consort Shui gave a start. Qin Wangfei, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Esteemed Empress Dowager is here, so you need proof for your words. Don't talk nonsense. If Yunshi remembers correctly, according to the rules of the imperial harem, only the empress and the head of the 4 consorts have the right to receive double rewards. Esteemed Empress Dowager just said that His Majesty gave noble consort Chu double rewards, which makes her the head of the 4 consorts. Since the Empress isn't in the palace, the head of the 4 consorts sits by esteemed Empress Dowager's side. Noble consort Shui, you've quite the gall to seize the head of the 4 consorts. Noble consort Shui was so angry that she lost her cool. She stood up and cried, His Majesty only made her noble consort, not the head of the 4 consorts. Empress Dowager Li's hand stiffened at her words. Noble consort Shui immediately regretted her words, but it was too late. They'd been playing dirty and avoiding direct confrontation with Chu Qingge. Who knew that Han Yunshi would expose their masks in a moment of carelessness? Han Yunshi exclaimed again. She wasn't made the head of the 4 consorts. I thought she was, but with His Majesty's love for noble consort Chu, it's only a matter of time. Noble consort Shui, don't be so agitated. I'm not agitated, I'm just. Everyone had seen noble consort Shui's reaction just then. Even she felt that any explanation would be futile. Han Yunshi smiled. Noble consort Shui, there's no need to explain. I misunderstood. You can still sit in that seat for now. Was there anyone who spoke like that? Noble consort Shui clenched her fists inside her sleeves. She wanted nothing more than to rush over and slap Han Yunshi. Enough with this woman. She glanced at Chu Qingge, only to see the other woman looking back at her with disdain in her eyes. Chapter 428. Chu Qingge had always been a cold, proud, and aloof woman. She usually looked at people with disdain, much less scorn. When she was scorning someone, her gaze turned even more disdainful. Her scornful gaze and expression were an eyesore to noble consort Shui. If the Empress Dowager hadn't told her to avoid direct conflict with Chu Qingge and use Han Yunshi to deal with her, she wouldn't have given Chu Qingge so much face today. What does this stupid woman mean by looking at me with such disdain? Does she think she's noble just because the Empress Dowager flattered me? Does she really think the Emperor will make me the head of the 4 consorts for sure? What a fool! Chu Qingge's behavior at the Empress Dowager's birthday banquet and noble consort Yun's poisoned status had already exposed her stupidity. If it wasn't for the Chu clan's strong influence, no one in the imperial harem would take her seriously even if the Emperor doted on her. At first, they were just enemies, but Han Yunxi's instigation had planted the seed of hatred in noble Consort Shue's heart. Perhaps Chu Qingge didn't know, but Han Yunxi knew that the title, head of the four consorts, was noble Consort Shue's taboo. It was her most fatal weakness. Noble Consort Xiao used to be the head of the four consorts in the imperial harem, but no one took her seriously after she fell out of favor. Noble Consort Xiao was only a figurehead and refused to attend any events in the imperial harem, much less invite her. After Noble Consort Xiao fell out of favor and Noble Consort Yun was poisoned to death, Noble Consort Shui gained favor. With the Empress Dowager as her backer, she was second only to one person in the imperial harem. Noble Consort Shui didn't have the right to be made empress, but she could still be the head of the four consorts. Since she had no hope of becoming empress, the head of the four consorts had always been Noble Consort Shue's dream. Her dreams couldn't withstand mockery and disdain. Antagonism and hatred were two different things. If they were antagonists, Noble Consort Shui might only fight for favor with Chu Qingge. But if they were enemies, she'd be tempted to murder Chu Qingge again. Even if it wasn't for the sake of gaining favor, she'd still make Chu Qingge suffer. Chu Qingge didn't think too much of it. She really did disdain Noble Consort Shui, so she simply stared at her for a while before heading to her seat behind Noble Consort Ning. Mu Luiwei looked between Noble Consort Shui and Chu Qingge with a cold smile in her heart. She secretly rejoiced at the fact that she'd rejected Noble Consort Shui in the first place. Otherwise, she'd be scorned by Chu Qingge as well. Since Chu Qingge had already sat down, Noble Consort Shui had no choice but to sit down as well. After drinking a few cups of tea, the Empress Dowager had someone present Chu Qingge's reward. There weren't many things, nor were they rare, but they were all exquisitely crafted. Chu Qingge pretended to be happy as she accepted the gift and presented it to the Empress Dowager. It wasn't a rare treasure either, but it was still presentable. According to the rules of the harem, the new concubine had to give the sisters a greeting gift, and the sisters had to return the greeting gift. To put it bluntly, they were exchanging greeting gifts. After the Empress Dowager gave out her reward, Noble Consort Shui and the rest all took out their gifts. Chu Qingge returned each and every one of them. She'd even prepared Mu Liuyue's gift beforehand. After a while, the exchange of gifts was finally over. Han Yunxi had watched from the sidelines for a long time. She was the only one who'd come empty-handed. Noble Consort Chu, what did you prepare for Imperial Qin Aunt? Hurry and take it out for everyone to see. Mu Luiwei asked impatiently. She'd been looking for a long time and was certain that Chu Qingge hadn't prepared anything. Chu Qingge liked Mu Luiwei more and more. She'd been waiting for those words. I didn't think I'd be able to see esteemed Wang Fei in the palace, so I didn't prepare anything. Esteemed Wang Fei, you don't mind, do you? Chu Qingge pretended to be apologetic. In other words, Han Yunxi was a Wang Fei, not an imperial concubine. She didn't have the right to attend such events, much less exchange gifts with her. Everyone present had received a gift except for Han Yunxi. She should feel ashamed of her own inferiority complex if she was ignored like this. After half a year, Chu Qingge was getting more and more talkative. Han Yunxi was calm and composed as she said loftily, "It doesn't matter. This Wang Fei wasn't planning to accept your gift in the first place. Forget it." Instantly, the crowd fell into silence again. Not a single sound could be heard. Han Yunxi, Han Yunxi. Can your mouth be any sharper? Chu Qingge wanted to retort, but found herself powerless. Anger rose to her chest and nearly choked her to death. Mu Luiwei felt even more gloomy. Every time she tried to find a chance for Chu Qingge, she'd never succeeded. Empress Dowager Li couldn't bear to watch any longer. It'd be so much better if the Empress was here. Whether it was noble consort Shui or Mu Luiyue, they were all idiots. A cold smile flickered past her eyes before she said, judging from Qin Wangfei's tone, "You're unhappy." "How could that be?" Han Yunxi smiled. "She's just unhappy. Even I can see that." Empress Dowager Li insisted. She didn't give Han Yunxi a chance to explain herself, but added, "This is all my fault. I invited Qin Wangfei over without telling noble consort Chu sooner. Meeting gifts are an old rule in the palace. We can't abandon them. Since Qin Wangfei's here, it's unavoidable to give her gifts." So speaking, she rose to her feet and pulled Han Yunxi and Chu Qingge aside. "I'll make the decision for you two. Since you didn't prepare anything, the two of you can take off your accessories as gifts and give them to each other to express your sincerity. In the end, the older the ginger, the spicier. Everyone present could see that Han Yunxi was only wearing one accessory, the white jade hairpin that held her hair in place. The Empress Dowager wasn't as stupid as Mu Luiyue to use this to mock Han Yunxi's poverty. Her true goal was to make Han Yunxi remove that white jade hairpin. She believed that Chu Qingge wouldn't be stupid enough to give Han Yunxi a hairpin. She also believed that under her control, Han Yunxi wouldn't be able to find anything in the harem that could hold her hair in place. Thus, Han Yunxi had no choice but to take off her hairpin in front of everyone. Taking off one's hairpin was a huge matter for a woman. It was the same as taking off her clothes, something she couldn't do unless she was in the bedroom. If news of this spread, she'd be the laughingstock of the world. Even His Highness Duke of Qin's reputation would be tarnished. Han Yunxi's eyes flashed coldly, while the listless Chu Qingge was suddenly full of energy. She really had to thank this old Empress Dowager. What a brilliant move. Qinxia will abide by Empress Dowager's imperial edict. Chu Qingge purposely made a deep bow, elevating the Empress Dowager's words to the level of an order. Han Yunxi was very clear that no matter if it was a suggestion or an imperial edict, she couldn't go against the Empress Dowager's words as long as she had the chance. Although the Duke of Qin's estate was strong enough to earn Emperor Tianhui's respect, the relationship between monarch and vassal was still there. That mask had yet to be broken, so they were still bound by imperial power. But sometimes they could win in a battle of wits, while other times they couldn't hide. Han Yunxi knew that it'd be hard to avoid today's calamity. She never liked wearing too many accessories because she felt they were cumbersome. Besides the hairpin in her hair, the only other accessory she wore was the white jade crystal bracelet on her wrist. That was the first gift Long Fei Yi had given her. Leaving aside its value, she'd never give it to another woman even if it was an ordinary item. What to do? She couldn't just tear off a piece of her dress to tie up her hair in a setting like this, could she? And she couldn't just borrow a hairpin from Su Xiaoyu, a servant girl, could she? Although it didn't seem like much to her, the news would spread in front of the other women in the imperial harem. By then, the world would know that Qin Wangfei and noble consort Chu had ended up in such a sorry state just to exchange jewelry. She'd lose all her face back in the modern era, wouldn't she? Long Fei Yi wouldn't know where she'd lose all her face. By now, Chu Qingge had already taken off her bracelet and offered it up with both hands. Qin Wangfei, this is a violet gold bracelet personally made by Jiangnan's famous craftsman Yan Ruyu. It's also my favorite bracelet, so I'll give it to you. I hope you'll disregard former enmity and give me more pointers. Chu Qingge was in a good mood, so her words were much more modest. Han Yunxi looked at it but didn't take it. Currently, everyone's eyes were on the violet jade bracelet, waiting for Han Yunxi's reaction. Very soon, Mu Luiyue said coldly, "Imperial Qin aunt, you're putting on airs in front of Imperial grandmother. What, are you bullying noble consort Chu because she's new to the palace?" That was where the dangers of fighting in the imperial harem lay. Han Yunshi had the upper hand just a moment ago, but now she was in a predicament. There were only two paths in front of her: accept the gift and give it back, or bear the crime of humiliating noble consort Chu and accept the Empress Dowager's punishment. Han Yunshi knew that the second path would be worse for her. She simply accepted Chu Qingge's violet gold bracelet with a smile. It's very beautiful. Many thanks to noble consort Chu. By now, the entire hall had fallen into a frightening silence. The air seemed to have frozen, making it difficult to breathe. Now it was time for Han Yunshi to return the favor. Everyone waited anxiously. Even Su Xiaoyu, who was standing behind Han Yunshi, couldn't help but feel anxious for her sake. After all, it was truly shameful for a dignified Qin Wangfei to be unable to take out a single piece of jewelry as a gift. She even had to take off her hair in public. Imperial Qin Aunt, what are you planning to give noble consort Chu? Hurry and take it out so we can all broaden our horizons. Mu Luiyue smiled happily. This was probably the first time she'd ever called out the words, Imperial Qin Aunt. That's right, Qin Wangfei. Everyone's waiting. We all know you have something good, so don't keep us in suspense. Noble consort Shui grinned as well. Chu Qingge was filled with anticipation as a rare smile graced her face. This was the first time she'd felt so happy in the past 6 months since she'd heard about the marriage alliance. Han Yunshi, Chu Qingge, want you to have a taste of your wretched state today. Han Yunshi's eyes grew dark. She truly regretted not wearing any jewelry to show off. She'd already passed through all sorts of storms, so why did she fall for her bad habit of not wearing jewelry? Soon enough, some of the nosy imperial concubines began to urge her on as well. Han Yunshi was very clear that she had no way out, so she turned to look at Su Xiaoyu. Although borrowing Su Xiaoyu's hairpin to tie up her hair in public was beneath her status as Qin Wangfei, she had no choice but to throw caution to the wind at a time like this. Compared to tearing up her sleeves, borrowing Su Xiaoyu's hairpin was much less shameful, right? Seeing Han Yunshi turn around, Empress Dowager Li, noble consort Shui, Chu Qingge, and Mu Luiyue all grew excited. Finally, they could make Han Yunshi fall for it for once. But before Han Yunshi and Su Xiaoyu could speak, an announcement came from outside. His Highness Duke of Qin has arrived. Chapter 429. His Highness Duke of Qin is here. Chu Qingge was the first to turn towards the door. Her tightly pursed lips exposed the agitation and nervousness in her heart. Mu Luiyue followed closely behind, unable to hide the anticipation in her eyes. She hadn't seen His Highness Duke of Qin since the last time she'd served him tea and called him Imperial Uncle Qin. Soon enough, everyone else was looking towards the entrance in disbelief as well. His Highness Duke of Qin is here. How is that possible? His Highness Duke of Qin only came to the palace a handful of times in a year. Unless summoned, he rarely showed himself, much less came to Empress Dowager Li's quarters. Today was a tea party between noble consort Chu and the imperial harem. It was impossible for His Highness Duke of Qin to come. He shouldn't have. What was he doing here? Han Yunshi was surprised as well. Like many others present, she thought she'd heard wrong. But very soon, the announcement was heard again and again, each time louder and clearer than the last. Everyone was listening, it couldn't be wrong. Long Fei Yi was here. Han Yunshi hadn't turned around, but she was looking at Su Xiaoyu with a sly smile. She knew she was fine. Even if this place was a dragon's lair, a tiger's den, an inescapable net, a mountain of blades, a sea of flames, as long as that man was here, she'd be fine. Han Yunshi only turned around when the eunuch at the entrance shouted out the last announcement. The timing was just right. A second more would be too fast, a second too slow. She saw that tall and proud figure appear at the entrance, his back facing the sun. His perfect figure seemed to be covered in a layer of golden light, noble and mysterious, like a god. Han Yunqi's lips curved upwards, her eyes sparkling as she smiled resplendently. Silence fell all around. Han Yunqi's clear voice was especially pleasant to the ears. She bowed and said, "Qinxia pays respects to your highness. May your highness live for thousands and thousands of years." At her words, everyone recovered their senses. The concubines all rose to their feet, including noble consort Shui and noble consort Ning. They all bowed on the spot. "Greetings to your highness Duke of Qin." "No need for formalities," Long Fei Yi said indifferently. The consorts and concubines rose and returned to their seats. Next, it was Mu Luyue, the youngest crown prince consort, who bowed. Mu Luyue had no choice but to bow. "Imperial Qin uncle is blessed." Long Fei Yi didn't even look at her. He just waved his hand. Mu Luyue stood up. Her blazing heart was about to break into pieces. Then, Long Fei Yi bowed to the Empress Dowager. As for Chu Qingge, she was a newcomer. Before she was introduced, she could only wait on one side. Empress Dowager Li's eyes flashed coldly. Today, she had steeled her heart to make Han Yunqi lose her hair in front of the crowd and embarrass her in public. Even if the Long Fei Yi was here, Han Yunqi would still have to give Chu Qingge a gift. Smiling like a tiger, she teased, "Someone come, hurry and see what kind of wind is blowing outside today to bring the Duke of Qin to my humble abode." The mama by Empress Dowager Li's side wasn't stupid enough to look outside. She chuckled and said, "Esteemed Empress Dowager, today is noble consort Chu's first meeting tea party. If it wasn't for something important, His Highness probably wouldn't have come." "TSK TSK." Han Yunqi sighed with emotion in her heart. No wonder she's Empress Dowager Li's mama. She really knows how to talk. That's true. What business does the Duke of Qin have to find me at this time? Empress Dowager Li asked seriously. "It really is something important," Long Fei Yi said mildly. Everyone grew puzzled at his words. His Highness Duke of Qin had only come for Han Yunqi's sake. What other important matters could there be? As an imperial prince, it was inappropriate for him to appear at noble consort Chu's first meeting tea party. Empress Dowager Li was also bewildered. Could it be that Long Fei Yi had caught on to something? After doing so many bad things, Empress Dowager Li was nervous. She thought for a long time, then asked tentatively, "What is it?" Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi said, "Qin Wangfei's health hasn't been good recently, so this prince came to take her back to rest." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone present was immediately dumbfounded. They weren't dreaming, right? Was this person really the cold and detached Duke of Qin? When did this man learn to care about a woman's health? Empress Dowager Li suddenly felt like she'd been played. What kind of important matter was this? "Heh, Duke of Qin, this is why you came to find me." Empress Dowager Li sneered. Empress Dowager misunderstands. This prince came to find the Wangfei. Long Fei Yi said. Perhaps Han Yunqi would take it easy in front of Empress Dowager Li, but he never would. Empress Dowager Li clenched her fists. Although she wanted to lose her temper, she was still rational enough to know that she couldn't win against the Duke of Qin. Suppressing her anger, she laughed. When did the Duke of Qin learn how to dote on people so well? Long Fei Yi didn't reply, but said to Han Yunqi, "Why haven't you bid farewell to the Empress Dowager yet?" Just a moment ago, Han Yunqi had been as elegant and dignified as a queen, but now she was docile. With great respect, she said, "Yes, Your Highness." Those who didn't know better might think she was being docile, but she was just following her husband's lead. Empress Dowager Li didn't give Han Yunxi a chance to leave. She smiled and said before Han Yunxi could speak, "Duke of Qin, I'm afraid Qin Wangfei won't be able to leave for a while." "Why not?" Long Fei Yi asked. Empress Dowager Li grew calm and composed before introducing Chu Qingge, who had been ignored for a long time. "Duke of Qin, this is His Majesty's new noble consort, Noble Consort Chu. She's a member of Western Zhou's Chu clan." Chu Qingge had been standing there for so long, staring at Long Fei Yi. She'd waited for so long before she was finally brought up. Her cold eyes were filled with indescribable grief. "Long Fei Yi, ah, Long Fei Yi. I, Chu Qingge, still haven't confessed my infatuation. Who knew that when we met again, we'd already be brother-in-law and sister-in-law?" She assumed that Long Fei Yi would look her way, but her pride and inferiority complex made her hide all the emotions in her eyes. She didn't want the shrewd man to see them. But Long Fei Yi didn't even turn around to look at her. Chu Qingge's heart sank into a bottomless abyss. "Noble Consort Chu, this is His Highness Duke of Qin. You should have met him at my birthday banquet before," the Empress Dowager continued with the introductions. Chu Qingge was filled with grievance and unwillingness as she bowed. "Greetings to Your Highness Duke of Qin. 10,000 blessings to Your Highness Duke of Qin. You may rise." Long Fei Yi's impatience was obvious. "Empress Dowager, why can't Qin Wangfei leave?" Only then did the Empress Dowager tell them about Han Yunxi and Chu Qingge's exchange of jewelry. While she spoke, Han Yunxi didn't even dare to look at Long Fei Yi. She figured that Long Fei Yi would definitely despise her for falling for something like this. Han Yunxi didn't dare to look at Long Fei Yi, but Long Fei Yi's deep, cold eyes were fixed on Han Yunxi the entire time. "Duke of Qin, this Wang Fei of yours shouldn't be a petty person, right?" the Empress Dowager said with a smile. Even 10 Empress Dowager Lis couldn't compare to one Long Fei Yi's IQ. Long Fei Yi glanced at Han Yunxi's hair and understood everything. He was too lazy to waste words with Empress Dowager Li, so he tore off a long piece of brocade white cloth from his sleeve. What was he doing? Everyone watched in disbelief, not knowing what to make of it. Han Yunxi was puzzled as well, but Long Fei Yi walked up behind her and used the cloth to draw a line on her hair. "How do I tie this?" he asked. In a flash, everyone sucked in a cold breath. They never expected His Highness Duke of Qin to tear off his own sleeve and use it as a hair tie for Han Yunxi's hair. Moreover, it looked like he was going to tie up Han Yunxi's hair in front of everyone. This was the high and mighty Duke of Qin. His hands were used to overturn the clouds and rain, devise strategies, and rule the world. No one would ever dream that he'd do such a thing for a woman, much less in front of everyone. Mu Luyue pursed her lips, on the verge of tears. Meanwhile, Chu Qingge's heart was filled with bitterness, but she couldn't say a word. She never believed that this man liked Han Yunxi that much. Even if he doted on her, there had to be a bottom line. But today she realized that Tianning's icy Duke of Long Fei Yi really knew how to dote on women. Cold Empress Dowager Li looked on, speechless. She didn't have Mu Luyue or Chu Qingge's heart. She was furious and unwilling to accept this. She'd finally gotten her chance. She thought that even Long Fei Yi wouldn't be able to break out of her trap, but he'd done such a thing instead. Han Yunxi only had 2 ways to break out of her trap. One was to directly take off her hair and give the jade hairpin to Chu Qingge before thinking of a way to tie up her hair. The other was to find a way to tie up her hair before taking out the jade hairpin and giving it to Chu Qingge. Taking off her hair in front of everyone was an utterly humiliating act. Although the second method prevented her from taking off her hair in front of the crowd, it was still embarrassing to borrow Su Xiaoyu's hairpin or tear off her own sleeve. If word got out, she'd become a laughingstock. However, if His Highness Duke of Qin were to do this for her instead, it wouldn't just be a joke if word got out. It would be a beautiful story. His Highness Duke of Qin doted on Qin Wangfei so much that he'd personally tie up her hair for her sake. Which woman wouldn't be envious of such a thing? All the women in the room stirred restlessly, but Long Fei Yi acted as if no one else was around. He held the strip of cloth in front of Han Yunxi's hair and gestured for a long time, his expression serious and solemn. His brows were furrowed so deeply that they formed a crescent shape. Damn it, even an army of thousands couldn't stop him. Today, he stumped over something as simple as tying up her hair. He really didn't understand. Meanwhile, Han Yunxi was still immersed in her unexpected happiness. She didn't help him. She knew that Long Fei Yi would take her away, but she never expected Long Fei Yi to do it this way. She looked at Long Fei's tattered sleeve and suddenly felt like laughing. Finally, Long Fei Yi grew unhappy and asked in a low voice, "How are you going to tie it up?" Han Yunxi recovered her senses and took off her jade hairpin. She tidied up her hair and tied it into a ponytail with her bare hands. "Your Highness, this will do." Everyone present was watching. She could have tied it up herself, but she didn't. He could have tossed the headband to her, but he didn't in the end. Long Fei Yi's sword-wielding hand took great effort to tie up Han Yunxi's ponytail. Although it wasn't very neat, it was still tight enough that it wouldn't fall off. Finally, the jade hairpin was removed. "Noble Consort Chu, this white jade hairpin is for you," Han Yunxi handed it over. Chu Qingge accepted it dejectedly. This white jade hairpin was very ordinary. Even 10 of them couldn't compare to her bracelet. All of the women present had sharp eyes. They could tell at a glance whether something was valuable or cheap. There was no such thing as exchanging gifts. If word got out, the Duke of Qin's estate would look very shabby. Noble Consort Shui's eyes flashed with disdain. She was about to speak when Han Yunxi revealed her left wrist. She gently stroked the white jade crystal bracelet on her wrist and said helplessly, "The Duke of Qin's estate is poor. This Wangfei doesn't have any expensive accessories. I ask that Noble Consort Chu doesn't dislike this white jade hairpin. It's the thought that counts." Chapter 430. If the Duke of Qin's estate was poor, that meant the Duke of Qin was poor. Was it really alright to say such things in front of His Highness Duke of Qin? How much silver had His Highness Duke of Qin donated to the charity bazaar? How many limitless gold cards did His Highness Duke of Qin own? How many villas and gardens did he own? His Highness Duke of Qin never took a salary from the court or the imperial clan. How many men and horses did he raise? Aside from that wretched Han Yunxi, who else in the world dared to say that the Duke of Qin was poor? Long Fei Yi's mouth twitched as he ignored her. Aside from Long Fei Yi, everyone else present felt like they were being abused. Including Empress Dowager Li, everyone was staring at the crystal bracelet on Han Yunxi's wrist. Shocked wasn't enough to describe their current expressions, but astonished. The bracelet was sparkling and translucent, as warm as water without a single impurity. It glowed with a faint layer of fluorescent light, white with hints of purple. It was as beautiful as a dream. Which woman who could sit in the Empress Dowager's palace of heaven and earth didn't know her stuff? They could tell at a glance what Han Yunxi was holding. It was a jade crystal. Jade crystal was one of the rarest stones in Cloud Realm continent. It was even more valuable than gold, jade, and luminous pearls. Moreover, the purple jade crystal in Han Yunxi's hand was the most precious of all. Even a tiny bit of it was worth cities. The largest jade crystal found so far was only the size of a thumb. It had been made into a ring and worn on the hands of the Northern Dynasty's emperors. Even the World Financial Group had fought over that jade crystal when it was first discovered. Who would have thought that Han Yunxi was wearing a jade crystal bracelet on her wrist? A bracelet. What was a bracelet? Of all jewelry, it required the most materials. To make a jade crystal bracelet, the raw materials had to be larger than the bracelet itself. Moreover, the raw materials had to be flawless. Even if he could imagine how much jade crystal was needed to make such a bracelet, he couldn't imagine the value of this bracelet. Yet such an unimaginable object was actually wearing Han Yunxi's wrist. It glowed with a unique luster that was impossible to fake. So, how was the Duke of Qin's estate poor? How was it poor? How was he poor? Han Yunxi was clearly flaunting her wealth. Chu Qingge was so angry that she was about to cry. Don't bully me like this. How should she reply to Han Yunxi's, "The gift is light, but the thought is heavy"? Wearing such a priceless bracelet, he gave her a white jade hairpin that could be bought with 2 or 3 taels of silver. That was one thing, but he had to show the bracelet in front of everyone. Just now, everyone saw that she gave Han Yunxi her purple gold bracelet. Now that Han Yunxi showed the bracelet on her wrist, even an idiot could tell that Han Yunxi was using this method to tell everyone that she didn't like the purple gold bracelet and wouldn't wear it. For the first time, the proud and cold Chu Qingge admitted that she'd suffered a blow. Everything that Han Yunxi had was given to her by the man who stood beside her and did her hair for her. As for her, once she entered the palace, she'd never have a chance to fight for the throne in this lifetime. Chu Qingge looked at Long Feiyi standing behind Han Yunxi. Although they were in the same room and less than 10 steps apart, she felt like she'd never be able to reach him again. As she stared and thought, the corners of Chu Qingge's eyes actually grew damp. Noble Consort Shui had wanted to use the difference between Chu Qingge's bracelet and Han Yunxi's white jade hairpin to mock Han Yunxi for being stingy and making the Duke of Qin's estate look shabby. But now she was silently rejoicing that she'd been too slow to speak. Otherwise, she'd probably be trampling on her own face if she did. Mu Luiyue was the one who'd been slapped in the face the most. She'd been the one who'd mocked Han Yunxi's attire before, but now everything before her was proof of her shallowness and ignorance. Actually, no one present was poorer than Mu Luiyue. The Crown Prince was incorruptible and honest. Combined with the disaster relief funds, the Eastern Palace's finances had always been tight. As the Crown Prince's consort, Mu Luiyue's monthly allowance was limited. If envy, jealousy, and hate could be seen, then the hall would be filled with them right now. Even Empress Dowager Li was jealous. How could a commoner like Han Yunxi wear such a precious bracelet? She wanted a bracelet like that too. Of course, Empress Dowager Li had even more considerations. Han Yunxi had been flaunting her wealth at the Palace of Heaven and Earth today to compete with the other women in the imperial harem, but the wealth she'd flaunted was His Highness Duke of Qin's. His Highness Duke of Qin had a knack for making money. It was an open secret in court that he owned many properties. Moreover, the charity auction had exposed the depth of the Duke of Qin's wealth. But today, the jade crystal bracelet had revealed more than just wealth. It was enough to contend against the imperial clan and the imperial court. His wealth was enough to rival an entire nation. The more Empress Dowager Li thought, the more worried she grew. The Duke of Qin's strength was far stronger than she and Emperor Tianhui had estimated. When Chu Qingge didn't reply, Han Yunxi shrugged her shoulders and didn't waste any more words. Esteemed Empress Dowager, can Yunxi leave now? Although this was Han Yunxi's question, it was as good as Long Feiyi's. Long Feiyi was standing behind Han Yunxi. What other tricks could Empress Dowager Li play if she wanted him to stay? Actually, Empress Dowager Li wanted nothing more than for Long Feiyi to leave as soon as possible. She couldn't even fake a smile now. Since your body isn't well, you should go back and recuperate. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi bid their farewells. Under the gazes of the crowd, Long Fei Yi took Han Yunxi's hand and led her out of the room. His movements were natural, as if he'd gotten used to it. Silence filled the hall as all eyes followed them. Many of the women in Emperor Tianhui's harem were stirred by the sight of His Highness Duke of Qin. Unfortunately, Emperor Tianhui had no time to pay attention to them. Currently, he was angrily slamming the table because of Northern Li's horse plague. It was his first chance to go to war with Northern Li since ascending the throne, but who knew something like that would happen? In that case, he would no longer have a reason to attack the Bailey Navy of Fishery Island. If he knew this would happen, he might as well have ignored Northern Li's threat at the three-way battlefield and interrogated Bailey Yuanlong for his unauthorized deployment of troops. At the very least, he could take back some of his military power. So far, Emperor Tianhui hadn't gained a single advantage from the disaster relief efforts to Northern Li's retreat. Instead, he'd missed one golden opportunity after another. How could he not be angry? News of Han Yunxi's jade crystal bracelet would reach Emperor Tianhui's ears soon enough. He'd be both angry and worried. The Duke of Qin's power overturned the court and his wealth rivaled that of a nation. How long could he keep his throne? After Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi left, the palace of heaven and earth was filled with whispers. Empress Dowager Li's group and Chu Qingga's spirits had waned. Empress Dowager Li had set up a dinner party for Han Yunxi and Chu Qingga, but there was no need for that now. After a few false pleasantries, the Empress Dowager dismissed everyone. As soon as Chu Qingga left the palace of heaven and earth, Mu Luiyue hurried to catch up. Noble consort Chu, please wait. Chu Qingga didn't stop, but she slowed down her steps. Mu Luiyue walked by her side and murmured, Noble consort Chu, may I have a word with you? Chu Qingga fell silent for a long time before she replied, all right. Behind them, Empress Dowager Li and noble consort Xue were leaning against the railings on the balcony, staring at their backs. Muhu is truly wise. As expected, you guessed correctly, noble consort Xue fawned. She'd gone to find Mu Luiyue to discuss an alliance against Chu Qingga, but couldn't reach an agreement. Instead, she'd come to Empress Dowager Li to complain. Instead of being angry at Mu Luiyue's stupidity, Grand Consort Li was very happy. As long as Chu Qingga doesn't reject that Luiyue girl, we'll have a chance. Empress Dowager Li's eyes flashed with malice. Both Mu Luiyue and Chu Qingga had grudges against Han Yunxi. As long as Mu Luiyue could win Chu Qingga's trust and form an alliance with her, it'd save her and noble consort Xue a lot of trouble. When necessary, they could even use Mu Luiyue to trick Chu Qingga. Rather than fighting in person, why not borrow Mu Luiyue's stupidity? Mu Fei, if Chu Qingga's thinking the same as ours, then... Noble consort Xue hesitated. After all, it was one thing to have a grudge against Han Yunxi and another to fight for the Empress's position. If Chu Qingga used Mu Luiyue against them, then things would get out of hand. Empress Dowager Li laughed coldly. Judging from Chu Qingga's heart, she won't be interested in fighting for the Empress's position for the next year or so. Empress Dowager Li had lived in the imperial harem for half her life. Which young court lady or concubine hadn't been seen through by her at a glance? Judging from Chu Qingga's personality and past behavior, she'd be thinking of attacking Han Yunxi instead of fighting for the Empress's position. Of course, she'd have to use Mu Luiyue to make Chu Qingga hate Han Yunxi to the core. Mu Fei is wise and brilliant. Noble consort Xue rejoiced. Empress Dowager Li glanced at her but didn't say anything. In the end, she was still worried about the Empress. If the Empress was here, she wouldn't have wasted so much effort today. Once noble consort Xue left, Empress Dowager Li summoned her trusted aide. Is there any news from Medical City? Although no less than 10 famous doctors had already diagnosed the Empress's mental illness as incurable, Empress Dowager Li and the Crown Prince still hadn't given up on finding a doctor. They'd been using their connections in Medical City, hoping to invite the head elder or even the academy head to step in. They're still pushing forward, I reckon. The aide sounded helpless. Empress Dowager Li knitted her brows before she murmured, "Keep following up. We can't let noble consort Xue know about this." Relationships between people in the imperial harem were complicated. Even Empress Dowager Li and noble consort Xue had their differences. Noble consort Xue and Chu Qingge were on the same page when it came to whether the Empress could return to the palace. If the Empress returned, noble consort Xue would have even less of a chance to ascend the throne. Actually, Empress Dowager Li should be supporting and trusting Mu Luiyue as the crown prince consort. She was the Empress's daughter-in-law and her granddaughter-in-law, but Mu Luiyue was useless. By now, Han Yunxi had already been taken out of the palace by Long Fei Yi. She had no idea that His Highness Duke of Qin had also followed them out of the palace to tie up hair for Qin Wangfei. Soon enough, news of this spread throughout Tianning's capital city and created a wave of hairbands. White brocade hairbands were in short supply and sold out. Tearing up sleeves to tie up hair had even become a new way to confess and ask for a hand in marriage. Countless men vied to imitate it. On the carriage back to the estate, Han Yunxi was sneakily eyeing Long Fei Ye's tattered sleeves. Chapter 431. If it was in the past, seeing Long Fei Yi protect and dote on her in front of everyone, Han Yunxi would definitely feel uneasy and even suspect that he had other motives. Who told her to have unrequited love before? But after being together for more than half a year, Han Yunxi no longer had those thoughts. She openly enjoyed the Duke of Qin's doting. She knew that this man liked her. As long as he liked her, as long as she also liked him, she would be able to accept his enormous favor. Han Yunxi stared at the sleeve for a long time. Long Fei Yi finally glanced at her. "What are you looking at?" Han Yunxi finally withdrew her gaze and pretended to be serious. "Thank you for saving me, Your Highness." Long Fei Yi raised his brows and sized her up. That was it. He wasn't going to say anything else. Wasn't going to comfort her. The situation just now had been really dangerous. She was really a bit nervous. If Your Highness had been a step late, Qinxie would have really lost face, Han Yunxi said again. Long Fei Yi indifferently replied, Qinxie is very happy that Your Highness could come to find Qinxie. Han Yunxi probed again. Long Fei Yi didn't move at all. Alright, she knew that he would have this kind of attitude. Even if she bowed deeply to express her gratitude, she reckoned that he would still nod expressionlessly. What a stuffy and cold guy. Han Yunxi glanced at the tattered sleeve again, then lazily leaned against the window and looked at the bustling scene outside. She had been locked up for too long. She really wanted to take a stroll around. Just as she was engrossed in watching, she suddenly felt a movement in her hair. Before she could react, Long Fei Yi gently pulled off the white brocade hairband. Her long hair fell down along with the band. Han Yunxi reflexively turned her head. Her long hair fell softly on her shoulders, making her small oval face look even more pure and gentle. She lacked her usual free and easy demeanor and had a bit more feminine gentleness. She was confused. What was this guy doing? Your Highness, just as she was about to ask, she stopped abruptly. She realized that Long Fei Yi was looking at her. His dark eyes were so deep that they seemed to be able to draw people in. Out of nowhere, Han Yunxi hurriedly averted her gaze. Silence reigned inside the carriage. For a long time, Long Fei didn't make a sound. Han Yunxi's heart seemed to be teased by something, and she couldn't hold it in. What the hell is this guy doing? She lowered her eyelids and stole a glance. Unfortunately, Long Fei-yi caught her in the act. Long Fei-yi had been looking at her the whole time. She simply turned her head to look at him directly. Who knew that Long Fei-yi's gaze would become more and more wanton? She wasn't afraid. She pulled up her long hair and fixed it with her hand. Long Fei-yi immediately pulled her hand away domineeringly, and her soft hair fell down again. Han Yunxi pulled it up again, but Long Fei-yi pulled it away again. Han Yunxi was about to pull it up again when Long Fei-yi opened his mouth. His voice was hoarse and deep. Very beautiful. Hair was often seen as a symbol of a woman's chastity. When a woman's hair was loose, it was either when her clothes were untidy and she was lazy, when she took off her clothes and slept at night, or when she took off her clothes to bathe. The only person who could see a woman's lovable appearance other than her personal servant was her man. Han Yunxi belatedly realized that her cheeks were flushed red. She pulled up her long hair, and he finally handed over the hairband. He didn't tease her anymore. Han Yunxi couldn't help but muse, was this guy bad to begin with, or did he turn bad? Silence fell as the atmosphere grew strange. Something seemed to be growing in the air. Under these circumstances, Long Fei-yi would never open his mouth, but Han Yunxi couldn't stand the atmosphere. She found a topic to talk about. Your Highness, how do you think General Mu raised such a stupid daughter? In the confrontation just then, Mu Liuyue's actions were the most disdainful thing Han Yunxi had done. I don't know. Long Fei-yi replied mildly. It was fine as long as he brought her out of Empress Dowager Li's palace. He didn't have the leisure to care about the struggles of the women in the imperial harem. At least for now, none of these women could affect the big picture. Now that they'd started chatting, Han Yunxi felt her breathing lighten. She grew serious. Your Highness, did Chu Qingge and Chu Tianyin go to the poison sect's underground palace last time for the sake of the perplexing butterfly illusion too? She and Chu Qingge had first become enemies at the poison sect's underground palace. If not for that, their relationship might not have developed to this extent. Long Fei-yi had long been paying attention to the matter, but he'd never brought it up. A complicated look flickered past his eyes before he said, Chu Qingge's poison skills aren't bad. She might have gone looking for medicine. That place was the poison sect's poison warehouse, a place where all sorts of poisonous plants were gathered. Indeed, many members of the poison community often went there to steal them. Your Highness, don't you think it strange? The Chu clan is a family of generals. Why would a girl like Chu Qingge study poisons? Han Yunxi asked next. That's her business, Long Fei-yi said simply. It was obvious that he didn't want to talk about it. Was she thinking too much? Seeing Long Fei-yi's attitude, Han Yunxi didn't ask any more questions. On the same night they returned to the Duke of Qin's estate. Han Yunxi used Xiao Mama, who in turn used Chu Shifeng to get her hands on Long Fei-yi's robes with torn sleeves. Esteemed Wang Fei, stealing His Highness's things isn't a good idea, is it? Xiao Mama asked carefully. Although Chu Shifeng had said that His Highness wouldn't wear it again, he hadn't thrown it away. It wasn't good to take it without His Highness's permission. Han Yunxi glared at her. Which eye of yours saw me steal it? Xiao Mama wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Of course no one had seen esteemed Wang Fei steal it, because she and Chu Shifeng had stolen it together. Xiao Mama realized yet another truth. Never argue with esteemed Wang Fei, or you'll be tortured to death. Xiao Mama had nothing to say, so Han Yunxi felt much more at peace. Her eyes flashed with a secret smile as she carried Long Fei-yi's robes upstairs. She was going to keep this robe and the headband at the bottom of her chest. The next day, everything was calm and peaceful at the palace. It was hard to say whether Long Fei-yi had discovered the missing robes or not. Who could guess His Highness Duke of Qin's thoughts? A few days later, Chu Shifeng returned with a large chest about a meter tall. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness gave this to you. Guess what it is? Han Yunxi examined it for a long time before asking doubtfully, medicinal ingredients? Such a big box, how many medicinal herbs would it have to contain? Chu Shifeng shook his head, so Han Yunxi asked next, clothes. Chu Shifeng still shook his head, so Zhao Mama hastened to add, medical books. Chu Shifeng shook his head again, making Zhao Mama impatient. You brat, you're still trying to keep esteemed Wang Fei in suspense. Esteemed Wang Fei, this thing is really heavy. This subordinate doesn't know what it is either, Chu Shifeng said innocently. It had taken him a lot of effort to carry the chest back from the hidden pavilion. Han Yunxi grew even more curious. She quickly opened the chest and saw the contents. All three of them were stunned. It was actually a large chest full of ornaments. The chest was over a meter deep and filled to the brim with ornaments of various styles and materials. In Han Yunxi's words, there were as many as the stars in the sky. They didn't cost anything. Zhao Mama couldn't help but speak the truth. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness isn't being generous, but simply doesn't know how to give women things. No one gave things to people like this, especially ornaments. This was even more wholesale than wholesale. Zhao Mama really did say too much, but Long Fei Yi just didn't understand. Han Yunxi kept smiling foolishly as she looked at the chest. Although she didn't like or get used to wearing ornaments, she was still very happy to see all the good intentions in front of her. She decided that from today on, she would learn how to wear ornaments with her clothes and dress herself up prettily. Where's His Highness? Han Yunxi asked. At the hidden pavilion, discussing matters with General Bailey, Chu Shifeng replied hastily. Normally, Chu Shifeng would just say he didn't know, but this time he gave a detailed reply. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi was too caught up in her joy to notice the details. Chu Shifeng quickly bid farewell. He was in a rush to accompany His Highness Duke of Qin to the Medicine Ghost Valley. The 15th wasn't here yet, but His Highness wanted to go ahead of time. Last time, esteemed Wang Fei had found out about the 15th from the Medicine Ghost Valley when they saved Bailey Mingxiang. His Highness had to take care of the matter. Since some things were already hidden, His Highness would keep them hidden until the end. With such a large chest of ornaments to pack, Han Yunxi's days of recuperation were finally less boring. Although there were a lot of ornaments, each one was of the highest quality and worth a fortune. Even with Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu's help, they only managed to organize a small portion after 3 days. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness must like you a lot, Su Xiaoyu said. Obviously, Zhao Mama rolled her eyes at her. Han Yunxi didn't speak. As she packed, she silently pondered how to apply poison to the ornaments and hide the needles. She didn't know martial arts, so she had to think of ways to protect herself and deal with her enemies. Esteemed Wang Fei, there's really too much. How many boxes would it take to put them all in? Zhao Mama asked helplessly. Han Yunxi thought for a bit before having Zhao Mama make a medicine cabinet. She was going to store the ornaments in separate drawers like medicinal ingredients. Esteemed Wang Fei, what are you planning to do? Su Xiaoyu was puzzled. Esteemed Wang Fei, isn't it inappropriate to store them like this? Zhao Mama didn't understand either. Han Yunxi would never tell them that she was going to use these ornaments as hidden weapons. If too many people knew about them, they wouldn't be called hidden weapons anymore. Stop wasting time, why aren't you going? With Han Yunxi's stern voice urging them, Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu didn't dare delay any longer. A day later, the medicine cabinet was finished and moved into the study. Han Yunxi did not let Su Xiaoyu or Zhao Mama help her. She used the letters she could understand to mark each drawer and then began to organize them. It had to be said, this was a large project. Han Yunxi felt that she urgently needed a trustworthy assistant. She could trust Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu, but it was a pity that they didn't understand poison and she didn't have the energy to teach them. Although taking care of these ornaments wasn't an urgent matter and it didn't need to be done in a day, Han Yunxi didn't like delays. She always wanted to finish things as soon as possible. It was like someone giving her a pillow when she wanted to sleep. When Han Yunxi was so busy that she didn't even have time to eat, Bailey Mingxiang brought a small piece of luggage and came over. They had already informed her beforehand, so Steward Luo directly brought her to the leisurely cloud pavilion. Needless to say, Han Yunxi had actually forgotten about this matter. She came out of the study and saw Bailey Mingxiang standing in the yard. She was wearing a simple and elegant maid dress. Her hair was combed into a simple bun and her hands were crossed at her side. Her body had almost recovered. After walking through the gates of hell, it was like she had washed off all the dirt. Her entire person had become steady and low-key. It had to be said, her appearance and temperament were even better than the maid's by Empress Dowager Li's side. Chapter 432. It had only been a month, but Bailey Mingxiang felt like she'd been reborn. Han Yunxi had a feeling that this woman hadn't only changed physically, but mentally as well. As soon as Han Yunxi walked out the doors, Bailey Mingxiang bowed in greeting. This servant greets esteemed Wang Fei. This, although they'd agreed before that she'd return to leisurely cloud pavilion as a servant girl after she recovered, Han Yunxi was still caught off guard. Actually, it wasn't just Han Yunxi, but Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu on the side. Han Yunxi walked closer and circled Bailey Mingxiang to examine her, her heart filled with emotion. In the end, she personally helped Bailey Mingxiang to her feet and said in a low voice, "I won't say much else. I'll say the same thing, you can leave whenever you want. I won't force you to stay." "This servant girl will remember," Bailey Mingxiang murmured back. Since things had come to this, Han Yunxi could only accept it. She just so happened to be lacking an assistant. She'd agreed to let Bailey Mingxiang be her assistant in the past. Bailey Mingxiang had dealt with poisons for many years, so she'd have a good grasp of them. It wouldn't take much effort to teach her. "Zhao Mama, clear out the room below the stairs for Mingxiang to live in. Bring her to familiarize herself with the rules of the estate," Han Yunxi instructed. Zhao Mama liked Bailey Mingxiang very much. She had Su Xiaoyu tidy up the room while she personally brought Bailey Mingxiang to familiarize herself with the place. When Grand Concubine Yi was in charge, the rules of the Duke of Qin's estate were complicated. The estate had its own rules, as did the various courtyards. Even the laundry had its own rules. But after Qin Wangfei took charge, everything became much simpler. In her words, "It's fine as long as you don't lose face for the Duke of Qin's estate when you speak and act." Zhao Mama took Bailey Mingxiang for a walk before returning to the hibiscus courtyard. "Miss Mingxiang, we'll be walking around this courtyard in the future. Let's not stroll around today." Zhao Mama pointed at His Highness Duke of Qin's sleeping quarters. "That's His Highness's sleeping quarters. No one is allowed to enter without permission from His Highness or esteemed Wang Fei. Mingxiang will remember. Granny Zhao can just call me Mingxiang in the future," Bailey Mingxiang said indifferently. Granny Zhao nodded helplessly and continued, "Other than that, there are no rules in this courtyard. The leisurely cloud pavilion has the most freedom. They just have to do their jobs well. It's getting late. Let's go." Bailey Mingxiang still nodded. After taking a few steps, she turned back to look at the quiet and solemn palace. She seemed to have made up her mind about something. Her expression was solemn and resolute. "Miss Mingxiang, what are you looking at?" Zhao Mama asked suspiciously. "Nothing. Let's go." Bailey Mingxiang turned around resolutely. 100 thoughts, 1,000 thoughts. Today, Ming Xian and June. Your Highness Duke of Qin, from today onwards, Mingxiang will serve you wholeheartedly for the rest of my life. From today onwards, Mingxiang will no longer have you in her heart. When Bailey Mingxiang and Zhao Mama returned to the leisurely cloud pavilion, Su Xiaoyu had yet to finish cleaning the room. Zhao Mama nimbly fetched some water to help her. Miss Mingxiang, please wait a moment. In Zhao Mama's heart, even if Bailey Mingxiang was here as a maidservant, she would only be esteemed Wang Fei's maidservant. Her status was always higher than that of a true servant. Su Xiaoyu muttered, Zhao Mama, it'll be faster if she helps with the cleaning. She didn't know if Su Xiaoyu did it on purpose or not, but Bailey Mingxiang heard her muttering. Bailey Mingxiang seriously sized up Su Xiaoyu, but didn't say anything. She rolled up her sleeves and entered the room to work. You can't. Zhao Mama hurriedly stopped her. Miss Mingxiang, esteemed Wang Fei already said that you won't be allowed to serve tea or do heavy work. You'll only be allowed to take care of those poisonous herbs. Zhao Mama, this room is mine to live in, so I'll clean it myself. Also, if you call me Miss Mingxiang again, I won't respond. The seemingly weak Bailey Mingxiang was quite stern when she got serious. Miss Mingxiang, as soon as Zhao Mama opened her mouth, Bailey Mingxiang frowned and looked over. Her serious gaze faintly intimidated Zhao Mama, causing her to obediently retreat. Zhao Mama sighed in her heart. Someone who had been a master was indeed different. No matter how young she was, she still had an aura. As soon as she and Su Xiaoyu came out, Bailey Mingxiang closed the door. Stinky girl, your wings have hardened. Are you bullying a newcomer? Zhao Mama poked Su Xiaoyu's nose as she questioned. Su Xiaoyu felt wronged. Zhao Mama, esteemed Wang Fei didn't want her to stay. It's not like you don't know. What does that have to do with you? Zhao Mama said unhappily. Let's make her suffer a bit so that she'll back off. Su Xiaoyu said in a low voice. Su Xiaoyu had been vexed recently. Han Yunxi had been busy tidying up those ornaments in the study all day and hadn't come to the courtyard to drink tea for several mornings. Her well-planned plan didn't have a chance to move forward at all. She had already decided to change her plan and find an opportunity to strike in the study. Bailey Mingxiang really got in the way. What you said makes sense. Then what kind of suffering do you think we should make her suffer? Zhao Mama said thoughtfully. Su Xiaoyu was overjoyed. However, before she could open her mouth, she sensed that Zhao Mama's expression had turned ugly. She resentfully shut her mouth and lowered her head. You have such bad intentions at such a young age. How bad will you be in the future? Zhao Mama sternly lectured. Su Xiaoyu's heart skipped a beat and she broke out in a cold sweat. She had been too impatient. You was wrong. You shouldn't have meddled. You didn't have any bad intentions. You just wanted to help esteemed Wang Fei. You will go apologize to older sister Mingxiang right now. Su Xiaoyu really wanted to knock on the door as she spoke, but Zhao Mama pulled her back. Mingxiang and esteemed Wang Fei's matter is something you can help with. You overestimate yourself. Go back and face the wall. Su Xiaoyu's face was full of grievances, but her heart was relieved. She knew that Zhao Mama didn't want to bicker with her. After Su Xiaoyu left, Zhao Mama originally wanted to enter the room to help. However, when she remembered Bailey Mingxiang's expression, she waited at the door. Who would have thought that she would have waited for 2 hours? If it wasn't for the sounds of cleaning coming from inside, Zhao Mama would have thought that Bailey Mingxiang had fainted. When it was time for dinner, Han Yunxi came out of the study and suspiciously asked, "What is she doing?" Zhao Mama honestly replied, "Esteemed Wang Fei, this servant doesn't think she can handle it. She can't even clean up her own room, so there's no need to stay. Han Yunshi loudly threw down these words and then went to eat. Inside the room, Bailey Mingxiang naturally heard this. She smiled and continued to work hard. In the dead of night, Bailey Mingxiang finally finished cleaning up the room. He was a person who didn't do any household chores, but after being tossed around like this, he was hungry and tired. His back was sore and his fingers were all red and swollen. However, compared to the pain from the poison, how could this pain be considered anything? Bailey Mingxiang tidied himself up before going out. He was surprised to see Han Yunshi leaning against the wall with her arms crossed. Zhao Mama was standing to the side, holding a piping hot supper. The master and servant pair were clearly waiting for him. He had thought that everyone was asleep. A warm feeling filled his heart. Bailey Mingxiang was about to speak, but Han Yunshi lazily straightened up and casually said, "Just in time. Let's eat supper together." Bailey Mingxiang revealed a faint smile and bowed, "Yes, many thanks esteemed Wang Fei." The next day, early in the morning, Bailey Mingxiang was waiting in front of the study. Han Yunshi smiled and said, "You actually woke up earlier than Xiao Yu, It had to be known that in the past, Su Xiaoyu was the one who woke up the earliest, even earlier than Zhao Mama. "Esteemed Wang Fei, good morning." Bailey Mingxiang bowed. Since entering the palace yesterday, he had always been polite. Han Yunshi was about to enter the study, but after thinking about it, he said, "Let's go to the courtyard and make some tea. It's been a long time since I drank the tea you made." Bailey Mingxiang's tea skills were top-notch. Preparing the utensils, choosing the water, starting the fire, preparing the soup, and preparing the tea was like flowing water. It was elegant and steady. While drinking tea, Han Yunshi began to explain to Bailey Mingxiang how to make poisons. Bailey Mingxiang's ability to clean up the house was poor, but his other abilities were particularly strong. While making tea, he listened to Han Yunshi's explanation. He was multitasking, but he was still able to make the tea just right. Not a single drop was spilled. The entire stone table was clean. He could understand almost everything Han Yunshi said, so there was no need for Han Yunshi to explain. When Su Xiaoyu woke up and saw the courtyard, she immediately stopped walking. "Good heavens, esteemed Wang Fei hasn't made tea in days, but she's in a good mood today." Su Xiaoyu purposely glanced at the stove, a smug smile in her eyes. It looked like she'd have to wake up even earlier tomorrow. After sitting for an hour and explaining the general situation, Han Yunshi brought Bailey Mingxiang into the study. A few days ago, she had already sorted out all the ornaments and placed them in different drawers. Next was to make the same type of ornaments into poisons. Han Yunshi boldly gave Bailey Mingxiang a few simple procedures that wouldn't be easily infected. Bailey Mingxiang was a little unfamiliar with the process at first, but after a few repetitions, he became adept and didn't make any mistakes. Lil Thing lay on the roof beam, secretly watching Bailey Mingxiang's every move. After a while, it came to the conclusion that this woman was very intelligent. With such a good helper, Mama Yunshi wouldn't have to work so hard in the future. Compared to Su Xiaoyu and Zhao Mama, Bailey Mingxiang was much less talkative. Aside from Han Yunshi's questions, he usually worked in silence and didn't waste words. But in the afternoon, he grew curious and couldn't help but ask, "Esteemed Wang Fei, using such precious ornaments to make poisons might be a good disguise, but it's truly a waste. They were all gifts from His Highness. I don't have the spare money to squander like this," Han Yunshi said helplessly. Bailey Mingxiang's heart gave a start. Only now did he realize the origins of these ornaments. It was truly inconceivable. "His Highness, he's lazy, so he couldn't be bothered to pick for me. He might as well give me a whole box so I could pick whatever I liked," Han Yunshi joked. Then why didn't esteemed Wang Fei return the rest? Bailey Mingxiang asked seriously. Han Yunxi gave a start before she realized that Bailey Mingxiang was joking as well. She smiled and said, "Unfortunately, I liked all of them." Bailey Mingxiang laughed as well. Esteemed Wang Fei, if His Highness was really lazy, then he wouldn't have given you any more. His Highness dotes on you. Han Yunxi naturally understood. She thought it over, then asked, "What do you think I should give him in return?" After receiving so many things from Long Fei Yi, she felt like she had to give him something in return. But besides tea, she had no idea what Long Fei Yi liked. Chapter 433. What did His Highness Duke of Qin like? Han Yunxi didn't know, and Bailey Mingxiang was even more clueless. Faced with Han Yunxi's question, Bailey Mingxiang hesitated for a long time before replying seriously, "Esteemed Wang Fei, the most important thing in giving a gift is the thought behind it. Esteemed Wang Fei has to express her own thoughts." Han Yunxi wasn't that serious. "Nonsense, it's as good as not saying anything, esteemed Wang Fei, no matter what it is, you'll like anything given by someone you like, right?" Bailey Mingxiang continued. Empty words. Han Yunxi didn't think much of it, but when she looked at the pile of ornaments in front of her, she secretly laughed in her heart. After a while, she asked again, "Mingxiang, you've liked someone before, right? Otherwise, how would you know?" Bailey Mingxiang was greatly alarmed and immediately denied it. "No. You're lying, you're guilty." Han Yunxi's insightful eyes made Bailey Mingxiang tremble with fear. She had already sealed that secret in the depths of her heart. She was afraid of the consequences of her daring adoration being exposed. Esteemed Wang Fei, Mingxiang really didn't. Mingxiang only knows that esteemed Wang Fei really likes a box of ornaments. Even if His Highness gave you a box of scrap metal, you'd still be happy, right? Bailey Mingxiang was smart and changed the topic to Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi never liked to talk about her likes and dislikes with others. She felt that it was truly boring and love-struck. Today, she didn't know why she was chatting with Bailey Mingxiang. After hearing Bailey Mingxiang's words, Han Yunxi didn't want to talk about it anymore. She teased, "All right. This Wang Fei will give him a box of scrap metal." Bailey Mingxiang smiled and didn't continue the conversation. After a while, Han Yunxi asked again, "Has His Highness been with your father for the past 2 days?" Han Yunxi hadn't seen Long Fei Yi since the day he delivered the big box of things. He didn't come back at night either. That fellow didn't allow her to go out. Could it be that he had gone somewhere else? "Mingxiang has never had the right to ask about the matters between your highness and father," Bailey Mingxiang replied truthfully. Han Yunxi nodded. If Long Fei Yi really went out, she wouldn't care if Xiao Mama stopped her. Once she was done with her work, she would definitely go out for some fresh air. "Pack up these things. I'll take you out to eat something delicious. We'll go secretly and not let Granny Zhao and the others follow us," Han Yunxi said in a low voice. "Thank you, esteemed Wang Fei," Bailey Mingxiang respectfully replied. She didn't know that His Highness Duke of Qin hadn't lifted the Wang Fei's confinement order. Han Yunxi and Bailey Mingxiang busied themselves for 2 days and finally finished dipping the big box of ornaments in poison. They sorted them out and put them in the medicine cabinet. All that was left was the finishing touches, which would be finished in half a day. Han Yunxi confirmed that Long Fei Yi hadn't returned home these past few days. She made an appointment with Bailey Mingxiang to go out tomorrow afternoon. Early in the morning, Bailey Mingxiang woke up early as usual. Just as he was about to go out, he saw Su Xiaoyu open the door and enter the room. "Xiaoyu, why are you up so early today?" Bailey Mingxiang asked. She had been the first to wake up every day. The first thing she did was to prepare tea leaves and refreshments for esteemed Wang Fei. Every time she finished preparing, Su Xiaoyu would wake up. "I'm up to take a dump." Su Xiaoyu rubbed her sleepy eyes and lazily replied. She was especially displeased with Bailey Mingxiang. She had already woken up early several days in a row, but who knew that she wasn't even as early as this woman? She had originally planned to take care of the matter at night, but that person in the attic was a night owl. She often didn't sleep in the middle of the night and stood by the window to take care of things, so she didn't dare to act rashly. Helpless, she could only stay up all night and make sure it was safe before taking care of the matter. Who knew that she would run into Bailey Mingxiang as soon as she entered the room? No one really treated her as a servant, so why was she so diligent? Seeing that Su Xiaoyu was heading to her room, Bailey Mingxiang didn't pay much attention and went to the courtyard to prepare tea and refreshments as usual. When Han Yunxi came downstairs, the sun had already risen. The early morning breeze at the end of spring and the beginning of summer was very comfortable. "Esteemed Wang Fei, good morning." Bailey Mingxiang slightly bowed. It was as peaceful as this morning. I smelled the fragrance of Chimen Hong from upstairs. Han Yunxi smiled as she sat down. On the stone table, there was an ebony tea tray, white porcelain teacups, dark red tea, and emerald green pastries. It seemed to be placed randomly, but it was well arranged and pleasing to the eye. The fragrance of the tea rose in spirals and seeped into one's nose. Bailey Mingxiang's white hands wandered around, her 10 fingers like orchids as she offered the first cup of tea. She lightly said, "Esteemed Wang Fei, please enjoy." Han Yunxi didn't say anything. She gently smelled and tasted it, her heart calm. The essence of Kung Fu tea was the word Kung Fu. It took time, it took time, it took time, it took time to calm down, it took time to think, it was called meditation. The courtyard was silent. The person tasting the tea and the person making the tea were all silent. Only the sound of water boiling and smoke rising from the small charcoal stove on the stone table could be heard. Bailey Mingxiang used a small delicate gourd to scoop up the water. The water was already scooped up, but it was still boiling in the gourd. It was scalding hot. Only this scalding hot water could bring out the color and aroma of Kung Fu tea. Su Xiaoyu hid in her room and leaned on the windowsill to watch this scene from afar. She was clearly a child, but her eyes had become incomparably sharp and cold, and they were filled with a coldness and determination. At this moment, she was like a hunter who had been lying in ambush for a long time, and her prey had finally arrived. How could the people in the courtyard know about all this? After a few cups of tea, Han Yunxi seriously instructed, "After you tidy up the things in the study, you'll be in charge of taking care of these poisonous plants in the courtyard starting tomorrow. You'll have to regularly apply water and poison. Every 10 days, remind me to take samples to study the changes in toxicity. The one on your right is a poisonous orchid. It's a highly corrosive poisonous plant." Han Yunxi spoke very slowly and in great detail. Bailey Mingxiang listened attentively and carefully remembered. From time to time, he would pour tea for her. Both master and servant had serious expressions on their faces. Suddenly, the water on the stove started to boil violently and looked like it was about to spurt out. Han Yunxi and Bailey Mingxiang looked over at the same time. Before they could figure out what was going on, the pot of hot water exploded without warning. With a bang, the boiling water splashed everywhere. Han Yunxi and Bailey Mingxiang instinctively dodged. Han Yunxi retreated quickly, but Bailey Mingxiang, who was close to the boiling water, couldn't avoid it. She fell to the ground. Her entire arm was soaked. The scalding hot water made her sleeves and skin stick together immediately. Bailey Mingxiang fell to the ground and looked at his arm. He was dumbfounded. Han Yunxi couldn't care less about why the pot of hot water suddenly exploded. She strode forward and made a prompt decision to pull Bailey Mingxiang up and leave. They had to quickly find cold water to cool down. Once the clothes and skin stick together, the wound would be troublesome. Quickly get up. Bailey Mingxiang came back to her senses and also got up. But who would have thought that when she stood up, she would see the stove behind Han Yunxi suddenly burst into flames. Bailey Mingxiang didn't know what was going on, but she knew that this was definitely abnormal. Princess Consort, be careful. She didn't hesitate at all. She tightly hugged Han Yunxi and turned her back to the stove. Pang! A loud sound rang out. The entire stove exploded. Fragments and charcoal flew everywhere and hit Bailey Mingxiang's back. The accident happened in an instant. The floor was covered in fragments and sparks. Everything quickly calmed down, but Han Yunxi could clearly feel Bailey Mingxiang trembling. Bailey Mingxiang. Han Yunxi quickly broke free. She looked at Bailey Mingxiang's back and sucked in a breath of cold air. She saw that Bailey Mingxiang's back had been burned by the charcoal. There were several wounds on his back. His clothes were burned and the skin was peeling off. His flesh was badly mangled. Han Yunxi looked at the exploded stove. After confirming that there was no further danger, she immediately let Bailey Mingxiang sit on the ground. She called for Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu while she fetched cold water to help Bailey Mingxiang wash his wounds. Zhao Mama was outside the courtyard. When she heard the explosion, she immediately rushed over. She quickly called for Su Xiaoyu to find a doctor and she helped fetch cold water. Princess Consort, are you all right? Are you burned anywhere? How did this happen? Why did it explode all of a sudden? Zhao Mama was most concerned about her mistress. It didn't matter if anyone else was injured, but if her mistress was injured, then everyone would suffer. Han Yunxi quickly treated Bailey Mingxiang's wounds and completely ignored Zhao Mama. Su Xiaoyu was hiding in the shadows as she viciously stared at Bailey Mingxiang. She wished that she could cut Bailey Mingxiang into 10,000 pieces. She had already done something to the stove. She had a good plan. When Han Yunxi's back was facing the stove, she would immediately shoot out a hidden weapon and detonate the stove. But who knew that Bailey Mingxiang would ruin it? Damn! After Han Yunxi finished treating the wound, she immediately brought Bailey Mingxiang into the room to treat his wounds. The hidden guards had already arrived and were inspecting the scene. A trace of worry flashed in Su Xiaoyu's eyes. She sorted out her emotions and hurriedly rushed over. Bailey Mingxiang was lying on the bed. Han Yunxi was treating the wound on his back. Fortunately, the temperature was lowered in time and the clothes did not fuse with the wound. Otherwise, it would be very troublesome. Zhao Mama stood to the side and looked at the red, swollen, and festering wounds. Her heart clenched. However, Bailey Mingxiang did not cry out in pain. His hands tightly gripped the bedding and he was so silent that he didn't seem like a scalded patient. In the silent room, Han Yunxi carefully separated the clothes from the wound. Then she disinfected it, applied medicine, and bandaged it. After treating the wound on his back, Han Yunxi did not stop to rest. She began to treat Bailey Mingxiang's arm. Zhao Mama thought that the wound on his arm was not serious, but who would have thought that the swollen jade arm would have a large blister the size of a palm? Seeing this, Han Yunxi's hand froze. Su Xiaoyu standing to the side could not help feeling goosebumps. Even she, the culprit, felt that this blister was terrifyingly large. Small blisters did not need to be treated, but such a large blister had to be punctured. Seeing that Han Yunxi did not make a move, Bailey Mingxiang finally spoke, "Esteemed Princess Consort, what is it?" The burning and needle-like pain spread through her back and arms. It wasn't that she didn't feel pain, it was just that she was not used to crying out in pain. Relax, it'll be fine. Han Yunqi said in a low voice. Her entire body sank down. She knew that this wound was supposed to be on her body. She decisively took out a disinfected needle and carefully punctured the blister. Then she cleaned up the fluid inside. When the blister was swollen, Bailey Mingxiang did not feel any pain. But once the blister was punctured and the fluid was cleaned up, he immediately felt a sharp pain. Such a large blister, how painful must it be? Chapter 434. Bailey Mingxiang's body tensed up, but she still did not make a sound. Han Yunqi's movements were very gentle as she carefully applied the medicine and bandaged the wound. Compared to her usual calm self, her tightly knit brows had a trace of irritation. Without a doubt, this kind of accident made her very annoyed. After treating the wound, Granny Zhao came over to help Bailey Mingxiang change her clothes, but Han Yunqi stopped her. She took a pair of scissors and cut off Bailey Mingxiang's clothes, taking them off to prevent them from touching the wound. Seeing Bailey Mingxiang's smooth jade back, Su Xiaoyu rolled her eyes and did not look at it any longer. This slut is meddlesome. She muttered in her heart. If it wasn't for this slut Bailey Mingxiang meddling, she would be looking at Han Yunqi's back right now. Then she would know if Han Yunqi really had a phoenix birthmark on her back, and she would be able to confirm if Han Yunqi was the person her master's Chu family was looking for. She had spent so much effort, but it was all for naught. Although she did not leave any evidence, the sudden explosion of the stove would definitely arouse the vigilance of Han Yunqi and the hidden guards. It would not be easy for her to make a move again. Su Xiaoyu became more depressed the more she thought about it. Her eyes flashed with a trace of viciousness. She really wanted to burn Bailey Mingxiang again. No, she should burn her to death to vent her hatred. Compared to Su Xiaoyu's viciousness, Granny Zhao's eyes were filled with pity. Up until now, Bailey Mingxiang had not made a single sound of pain, and Granny Zhao had seen it all. She had lived for so long, but this was her first time meeting such a brave young girl. After everything was taken care of, Han Yunqi let out a breath and softly said, "Thank you. Princess Consort's words are too serious. This is just this servant's duty." Bailey Mingxiang quickly replied. She knew that she would say this. Han Yunqi silently remembered this kindness in her heart. She told Zhao Mama to take good care of her and was about to leave when Bailey Mingxiang said in a low voice, "Esteemed Wang Fei, Mingxiang has a request." "I don't know." Upon hearing this, Su Xiaoyu secretly sneered. She knew that Bailey Mingxiang was not that simple. Since he had made a contribution, wouldn't he take the opportunity to ask for more? "Just tell me what you need." Han Yunqi was puzzled. Bailey Mingxiang was not someone who would ask for help easily. "It's a private matter." Bailey Mingxiang was a little embarrassed. Han Yunqi immediately let Granny Zhao and Su Xiaoyu leave. She personally closed the door and then asked, "Just tell me what trouble you have." Bailey Mingxiang lowered his voice, "Esteemed Wang Fei, today's matter doesn't seem like an accident. I've used the stove several times and it doesn't make sense for it to explode like this. Could it be that someone did something to the stove?" When these words were said, Han Yunqi was shocked. The stove had exploded for no reason, so of course Han Yunqi would be suspicious. She was also planning on asking the hidden guards about the investigation. What she was shocked about was Bailey Mingxiang's attitude. Bailey Mingxiang had used the excuse of having a request to send Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu away to remind her of this matter. "Could it be, you're suspecting?" Han Yunqi was a little surprised. Bailey Mingxiang decisively said, "If it was done by someone, then it was either Zhao Mama or Su Xiaoyu." Han Yunqi's heart skipped a beat. Of these two people, one was an old mama who had been loyal to the Long Fei Yi for many years, and the other was a child who wasn't even 10 years old. It really was hard for people to suspect them. Esteemed Wang Fei, think about it carefully, Bailey Mingxiang said in a serious voice. Han Yunxi sat down on the side of the bed and carefully thought about it. The stove had always been used properly, and the charcoal that Bailey Mingxiang used today was from before. It really didn't seem like an accident. If it wasn't an accident, then the only suspects were Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu, because there was no one else in Leisurely Cloud Pavilion. Moreover, the stove had been used multiple times, so it couldn't have been tampered with before it was sent in. Han Yunxi had always treated the Duke of Qin's estate as the safest place. Ever since Murong Wanru got married and Grand Concubine Yi went into seclusion to pay her respects to Buddha, she no longer treated anything that happened in the estate with caution. But now, this incident had come so suddenly. If it really wasn't an accident, but a man-made one, how chilling would that be? Seeing Han Yunxi's grave expression, Bailey Mingxiang sighed. I only hope that this was an accident. But this servant thinks it's better to be careful. Han Yunxi looked at the weak and injured Bailey Mingxiang with admiration in her eyes. This girl was a needle hidden in silk floss. She was both beautiful and intelligent. Her calmness and composure weren't something ordinary people could possess. Even an ordinary servant girl would be crying for her father and mother if she was injured like this, much less a daughter of a wealthy family. Who would have the time to think so much? Recuperate well. I'll get to the bottom of this. If it really was man-made, I'll pay back double. Han Yunxi said coldly, her eyes flashing with a ruthless light. When Han Yunxi left, a few guards were still investigating in the courtyard. Steward Luo had come over as well, while Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu were watching from the sidelines. Han Yunxi gave Zhao Mama and Su Xiaoyu tasks to send them away. As soon as Han Yunxi came over, Steward Luo fell to his knees with a thump. This servant handled things inappropriately. May esteemed Wang Fei meet punishment. What's going on? Is there a problem with the stove? Han Yunxi asked with a frown. Replying Nyang Nyang, there's no problem with the stove's design. Based on the current situation, it can only be a problem with the charcoal. Su Donglin reported truthfully. Han Yunxi was slightly alarmed. If there wasn't a problem with the stove's design, then this matter really didn't seem like an accident. She asked indifferently, what's wrong with the charcoal? There were two types of charcoal, white charcoal and black charcoal. The charcoal used in the Duke of Qin's residence was the most expensive white charcoal. It burned for a long time, didn't emit smoke, had a small smell, and was untainted. Moreover, it had a much lower explosion rate than the black charcoal used by ordinary people. The so-called explosion was the crackling sound that came from the burning charcoal and the splashing of sparks that would injure people. Based on the situation just now, it shouldn't have been an explosion, but an explosion. Therefore, even if there was a problem with the charcoal itself, it shouldn't have caused an explosion. The only possibility was that the charcoal was mixed with something explosive. Su Donglin was in a difficult position. It's still not clear. We've only analyzed the remaining dregs, but we didn't find anything explosive. This subordinate has checked the remaining charcoal, as well as the charcoal in use and in reserve in the residence. They're all safe. That's strange. Even if more than half of the charcoal had been burned and a lot of it had turned to ash, there should still be something strange in the dregs. Up until now, the scene hadn't been destroyed, so why couldn't they find anything? So, now we can confirm that there's only a problem with the charcoal. Han Yunxi asked as she personally checked the dregs of the charcoal. Indeed, she didn't find anything strange. Su Donglin nodded and said in a low voice, Esteemed Wang Fei, it's either that this batch of charcoal was accidentally mixed with something else when it was sent here, and the person who picked it didn't notice it, or, at this point, Su Donglin lowered his voice even more, or someone took the opportunity to tamper with it and added something in at the last minute. A trace of irritation flashed through Han Yunqi's eyes. In the end, it was still unclear whether this was an accident or man-made. Moreover, there was no evidence or clues at the moment. Han Yunqi pondered for a moment, then said indifferently, "This matter isn't allowed to spread. Steward Luo, buy another batch of charcoal and have a look. Also, find someone familiar with charcoal to look at the dregs." Steward Luo was overjoyed that esteemed Wang Fei wasn't punishing him. If it had been His Highness Duke of Qin, everyone present would have suffered a calamity. He didn't dare delay and hurriedly got up to do it. Su Donglin and the other hidden guards were cleaning up the scene. Han Yunqi was about to leave, but she turned back and took out some charcoal that hadn't been completely burned, as well as some dregs. "Esteemed Wang Fei, this is?" Su Donglin asked in a low voice. "This is the only clue we have." "I'll keep some so we can take a look," Han Yunqi said before turning to leave. It was a pity that the charcoal residue wasn't poisonous. Otherwise, Han Yunqi only needed to open up her detox system and scan the area to see if there was anything explosive inside. After all, some things couldn't be seen with the naked eye. News of this quickly reached Long Fei Ye's ears in the distant Medicine Ghost Valley. He didn't even say a word of concern for Bailey Mingxiang. Instead, he coldly tossed Chu Shifeng an order. Pass down orders to slowly investigate this matter. First, replace all the servants in the estate. Have Bailey Yuanlong transfer people over. This was a complete overhaul of the Duke of Qin's estate. With Long Fei Ye's personality, it was normal for him to do something like this. Without any evidence or clues, it was hard to draw conclusions or investigate. He couldn't figure out whether this was intentional or an accident, so getting rid of everyone was the best solution. Chu Shifeng's mouth twitched. He rejoiced over the fact that he belonged to the hidden pavilion instead of the Duke of Qin's estate. Otherwise, he'd have to get lost too. In His Highness Duke of Qin's eyes, there was no one else he could trust forever besides the guards he'd raised and the Bailey clan he'd sworn loyalty to. Chu Shifeng's first thought was Xiao Mama. She'd served him for so many years, but His Highness Duke of Qin had kept many things from her. How sad would Xiao Mama be if she heard this order? There were plenty of other servants who'd served him for years. How sad would it be to be chased out at such an old age and suspected of something? Chu Shifeng felt that the chances of this being an accident were higher. After all, the servants in the estate were all carefully selected. Of course, if this was intentional, Chu Shifeng's first suspect would be Su Xiaoyu. Although Su Xiaoyu was only a child, he'd investigated Su Xiaoyu's background thoroughly. Who told her to be the youngest to enter the estate? Children were easier to buy over, and their actions were less likely to arouse suspicion. Chu Shifeng thought of many possibilities, but he didn't dare to waste words with His Highness Duke of Qin. Without sufficient evidence, any suspicions or conjectures were useless. His master wanted 100% safety. He didn't care how many people's hearts were hurt. When the orders reached the Duke of Qin's estate, Su Donglin was the first to seek out Han Yunqi. "Esteemed Wang Fei, I'm begging you, please leave my aunt behind." She entered the palace at the same time as Xiao Mama, then followed Grand Concubine Yi to the Duke of Qin's estate. She's been conscientious and devoted her entire life to Grand Concubine Yi and His Highness Duke of Qin. She's never been disloyal. She doesn't know much and has never come to Leisurely Cloud Pavilion. She has to be innocent. Han Yunqi's face was filled with bewilderment. She didn't understand. Chapter 435. What was going on? Was someone trying to chase away Su Donglin's aunt? Han Yunshi was about to ask when another guard arrived. As soon as he entered, he fell to his knees and kowtowed to Han Yunshi. Esteemed Wang Fei, I beg you to let my father stay. Ever since the Duke of Qin's estate was built, my father has been in charge of the kitchens. Just like me, he serves His Highness and esteemed Wang Fei wholeheartedly without any disloyalty. May esteemed Wang Fei see clearly. Very soon, a third guard arrived with a pile of words and pleas. Han Yunshi had been mulling over the exploding stove for the past few days. She was currently feeling stifled, so it was unbearable for her to be bombarded by one person after another. Enough. Su Donglin, tell me, what's going on, she raged. Su Donglin quickly stepped forward and explained Chu Shifeng's orders in full detail. Han Yunshi gave a start. A complete change of personnel. His Highness Duke of Qin is so generous. All of the guards agreed in their hearts, but none of them dared to express it. It was already very bold of them to ask esteemed Wang Fei for mercy. How could they dare to talk behind His Highness's back? They didn't waste words or speak too much. Absolute obedience had always been their principle. Who knew if Long Fei Yi would be so angry that he'd replace all of them after finding out about their pleas? None of his subordinates had ever faced such a situation. Indeed, if it was in the past, these shadow guards wouldn't dare to say the word beg even if it was an extremely important matter. However, now that the Qin Emperor had a woman who dared to say no to him, the situation was different. The guards who followed these two masters around all day understood the situation best. If they came to plead with esteemed Wang Fei, it would definitely be effective. Han Yunshi knitted her brows and didn't speak. She was once again experiencing Long Fei Ye's heartlessness and cruelty. There were over 50 servants in the Duke of Qin's estate, most of whom had served him wholeheartedly for decades. Like Xiao Mama, there were quite a few who'd followed him from the palace all the way outside. How could he deny everything just because of an unsettled matter? Regardless of whether it was hurtful or not, how were these people going to live in the future after being banished? Who would dare to use someone who left the Duke of Qin's residence? How could someone who had been chased out of the Duke of Qin's residence still have a good life in the imperial capital? No matter how low a person's status was, they had their own circle and their own grudges. Once these people were expelled, how much ridicule and ridicule would they have to endure from the surroundings? All doctors had the heart of a parent. Han Yunshi didn't think she had the heart of a parent, but at least her heart was made of flesh. Finally, she calmly opened her mouth and said, "Tell your highness that I still need to investigate this matter. The matter of the replacement will be put on hold for now." The secret guards were overjoyed. After thanking him, they immediately went to report. Very soon, Chu Shifeng sent back news that the Duke of Qin had approved esteemed Wang Fei's request and ordered the guards to strengthen their defenses. It was from this time onwards that a phrase began to spread among the secret guards. With the Princess Consort here, there's no need to fear. In a few days, it would be the 15th. Han Yunshi asked, "Is His Highness still with General Bailey? Did he say when he'd be back?" Su Donglin shook his head. This subordinate isn't sure. Only the people at the hidden pavilion know. The hidden pavilion was as special as the solitary enclosure. It was Long Fei Ye's secret base of power. The guards there were different from the ones at the Duke of Qin's estate. Supposedly, they were even more well-trained than the ones at the Duke of Qin's estate. Send someone to ask around. Just say the 15th is almost here. His Highness will understand then, Han Yunshi intoned. She still remembered that Gu Qisha and Long Fei Yi had agreed to meet on the 15th. She didn't know if the man had found those two ingredients yet, but if Long Fei Yi was going to Medicine Ghost Valley, he'd probably take her with him. Han Yunshi was waiting for the 15th, but Long Fei Yi and Chu Shifeng had already been waiting at Medicine Ghost Valley for days. Gu Qixia was clearly still here when Han Yunxi came to ask for medicine, but he disappeared again after a few days. Currently, it was the dead of night. Moonlight shrouded Medicine Ghost Valley as if everything had fallen into dreamland. Long Fei Yi and Chu Shifeng were sitting on the roof of Gu Qixia's courtyard. "Your Highness, isn't this too much of a coincidence?" Chu Shifeng asked doubtfully. Before esteemed Wang Fei came to ask for medicine, he'd gone to look for the man a few times, but never found him. Moreover, the old steward had said that he wouldn't return before the 15th. But esteemed Wang Fei had shown up as soon as she showed up. Less than 5 days later, he disappeared again. There were only 7 days left until the 15th. His master had come early because he was afraid esteemed Wang Fei would ask about the 15th, which would make it difficult to explain. Judging from the current situation, Gu Qixia probably wouldn't show up until the 15th. Long Fei Yi didn't reply, but lay back with his hands behind his head. He stared at the stars in thought. Chu Shifeng didn't dare to speak, but stood up to stand guard in a corner. Esteemed Wang Fei is the only person who can make master so vexed, he thought. In fact, his master was such a busy person, but he was willing to take the time to wait here for the princess consort. Chu Shifeng only hoped to find the antidote for broomcorn millet poison as soon as possible and cure mute granny. Then everything would come to light and His Highness Duke of Qin's burdened heart would have a place to rest. Before daybreak, a messenger pigeon arrived from the Duke of Qin's estate. Long Fei Yi was still staring at the skies, unable to sleep at all. "Your Highness," esteemed Wang Fei asked about the 15th, Chu Shifeng reported in a low voice. While Long Fei Yi was hesitating, the old steward suddenly cried out, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, Your Highness Duke of Qin, my master has news." Long Fei Yi immediately rose to his feet. "Where is he?" "Your Highness Duke of Qin, this is a letter from my master to you." The old steward quickly handed over a secret missive. Long Fei Yi opened it and frowned before tossing it to Chu Shifeng. Gu Qixia had actually gone back on his word. They'd agreed on a year's time, but Long Fei Yi had shortened it to half a year. His condition was that the Duke of Qin's estate would owe him a favor if they found the antidote within that time. Gu Qixia had agreed to deliver the antidote on the 15th of the month, but now he'd gone back on his word. He'd given Long Fei Yi the panoptic red lotus first, while the bear Chuan wouldn't arrive until later. "Where is he?" Long Fei Yi asked. The old steward's legs trembled at the sight of His Highness Duke of Qin's icy expression. "This one doesn't know. How did this letter get here?" Long Fei Yi asked next. "It was a messenger pigeon," the old steward said as he took out the panoptic red lotus. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, kindly accept this." Long Fei Yi's anger finally subsided at the sight of the item. It looked like Gu Qixia really hadn't found the bear Chuan on purpose. Long Fei Yi didn't take the panoptic red lotus, but left him with a message. "Tell Gu Qixia that if he doesn't find the bear Chuan within a year, he'll have to bear the consequences." With one more antidote missing, the matter of mute granny would have to be put on hold again. Long Fei Yi could only have Tang Li keep watch over mute granny while keeping an eye on Andrew and Tang Zijin. As for why Gu Qixia had failed to find the bear Chuan, even the old steward had no idea. But one person had already found the bear Chuan. It was none other than the long-absent Gu. He'd left Muling, somewhere behind, so he'd long set foot on Fishery Island by himself. The Bailey Navy didn't stop anyone from setting foot on the island, nor did they have the right to do so. However, anyone who took Jun Xia half a step off the island would be turned into a porcupine by the Bailey Navy. When Goose set foot on the island, no one recognized him. This was because he was no longer wearing his usual enchanting red robes or his usual mischievous smile. Instead, he was dressed in black, with a black cloth covering his face. He was walking swiftly through the forest of Fishery Island like a vengeful ghost. He was looking for June Xia. His original plan was to use June Xia to trick Long Feiyi, but who knew that he'd been trapped on Fishery Island by Long Feiyi because he'd bullied Han Yunxi. His mood soured as soon as he heard the news. What bear Chuan? What tricking Long Feiyi? What brilliant plan? What killing two birds with one stone? Everything was thrown to the back of his mind. He didn't even tell Mu Ling her. He'd set off immediately the night he received the news, arriving at Fishery Island as quickly as possible. What a June Xia! How dare he bully Poison Lass? Let's see how I'll trick you. This was the off-season on Fishery Island. No one came to fish, and the entire island was as quiet as a deserted world. It was quite difficult to find June Xia here. However, who was Gu? It would take him only a few minutes to find a single herb on this island, let alone a living person. When dawn broke, he found June Xia in the depths of the coconut grove. Gu stopped abruptly, a trace of malice flashing in his eyes. He had to admit that the 3 months he'd spent on this island had left June Xia in a sorry state. After all, Long Feiyi hadn't trapped him for nothing. When June Xia and Ouyang Ningruo first set foot on Fishery Island, they brought some men and rations with them. Later, Ouyang Ningruo had taken everyone away, leaving only rations and fresh water for June Xia. However, those rations and fresh water were limited. The Northernly Imperial clan had sent people to deliver supplies, but the Bailey Navy had chased them away before they could even get close to Fishery Island. There was no way they could deliver anything. In less than a month, June Xia had used up all the dry rations and fresh water they'd left behind. In the following days, he could only drink rainwater and coconut juice and eat roasted fish. Back then, eating grilled fish in a world of ice and snow was such an enjoyable thing. But now, he had been eating grilled fish every day for more than 2 months. What kind of feeling was that? June Xia wanted to vomit whenever he saw fish, but he had no choice but to eat. If he didn't, then his only path was to starve to death. The current June Xia might not have been reduced to a barbarian, but he had a full beard and tattered clothes. He had Bailey Mingxiang's blood hidden in his robes, but had long forgotten about it. There was only one thing left in his mind that he couldn't figure out. Why hadn't the Northernly Imperial clan pressured Emperor Tianhui? Why hadn't the Northern Dynasty's emperors rescued him yet? Did something big happen in Northernly? Otherwise, the Northern Dynasty's emperors would never give up on him. The skies grew brighter and brighter. June Xia's stomach was rumbling with hunger, but he really didn't want to drink coconut juice or eat roasted fish. He opened his eyes and looked at the sky, then closed them again. But it was at this moment that the fragrant scent of rice wafted into his nostrils. The aroma of rice. He couldn't be wrong. This was definitely the aroma of rice that he hadn't eaten in 3 months. With a start, June Xia bolted upright. Chapter 436. The aroma of rice. June Xia felt invigorated as soon as he caught a whiff of the fragrance. He followed the scent and soon reached the depths of the coconut grove. He saw a black-robed, masked man cooking in the clearing. He seemed to have come prepared, for there were multiple bags of items by his side. He'd built 2 stone stoves and 2 pots, one of which was boiling water while the other was cooking rice. Beneath the snow-white layer, each grain of rice was plump and fragrant. White steam rose from the wafting rice, making June Xia salivate uncontrollably. He hadn't eaten a single grain of rice in 3 months. Of course, he was still a glutton. How could a 7-foot man bend his waist for 5 buckets of rice? Despite his sorry state, June Xia was still able to keep his composure. He swallowed and adjusted his emotions before walking over. This brother is so refined. Gu looked him over with a smile. I presume that your distinguished self must be Northern Li's Duke of Kong, Zhu Nixie. Zhu Nixie felt a little awkward at these words. News of Long Feiyi mobilizing Tianning's navy to surround Fishery Island had probably spread throughout Cloud Realm continent by now. It wasn't strange for anyone to recognize him. Of course, the awkwardness only lasted for a moment. Zhu Nixie arrogantly admitted, "That's your lordship. May I know your distinguished self's name?" "I'm just an idler from the Jianghu," Gu replied easily, as if he had no interest in Zhu Nixie's identity. "Brother, this isn't the right time to come to Fishery Island, is it?" Zhu Nixie asked next. Although half his soul had been taken away by the aroma of the rice, he still managed to keep his cool. Wasn't it strange that this black-robed man would come to Fishery Island to cook for no reason? You came at the right time. The lobsters in the illusory sea lake are fattening at the start of summer, Gu said. So, Zhu Nixie had heard that the illusionary lake produced lobsters during this season, but it was not easy to catch them. It required a lot of patience, so very few people would come. He had met 2 people last month, but they had all backed off. At this time, the water in the pot was boiling. Gu took out a bag of powdery things and poured them into the boiling water. Soon, a fragrance floated out. Unlike the fragrance of white rice, this time, it was the fragrance of meat. It was really fragrant. Zhu Nixie took a deep breath and couldn't hide his surprise. This is Northern Li's fat lamb hotpot soup base. It is known as the #1 hotpot in the world. The fragrance hasn't even fully emerged yet, but Majesty Kong could already smell it. I'm sure Majesty Kong likes this as well, right? Gu said with a smile. He was right. The fragrance had not fully emerged yet. If it continued to boil for a while, the fragrance would definitely spread for thousands of miles and leave a lasting aftertaste. Zhu Nixie's stomach was already stirred up by the boiling soup base. He sat down without being asked and laughed. Fat lamb hotpot soup base was originally a tribute to the imperial family, but it was only spread to the common people in the past year or 2. The supply is limited. Brother, you must have put in a lot of effort to buy this soup base, right? Gu laughed. People die from eating. Clearly, people die for wealth, and birds die for food. This guy was really good. He was saying, people die from eating. Zhu Nixie laughed. Brother, you're also a person with temperament. This prince likes it. At this time, the soup base was almost done cooking. The unique fragrance spread with the hot soup, provoking one's sense of smell and taste buds. Gu Qishao chuckled before taking a deep breath in exaggeratedly. Fragrant. It's really fragrant. Zhu Nixie hurriedly said, Brother, this is not how you smell the fragrance of fat lamb. It should be like this. As he spoke, he took a deep breath and held it. He let the fragrance fill his entire nose and slowly spread into his mouth. Gu hurriedly followed suit. Taking a deep breath and holding his breath was a form of enjoyment. It left a lasting aftertaste. Prince Kong is still the one who knows the ropes, Gu said. Zhu Nixie chuckled and continued to take deep breaths. He enjoyed the long-awaited fragrance. Even if he couldn't eat it, just smelling it was satisfying. After the soup base was completely boiling, Gu took the bags of various sizes and opened them one by one. There were only 2 things. One was a well-cut piece of mutton, and the other was green vegetables. Zhu Nixie couldn't help but swallow his saliva. The fragrant white rice, the mutton hotpot paired with the vegetables. It was meaty but not greasy. It was simply a delicacy. Gu glanced at Zhu Nixie and a subtle sneer flashed across his eyes. He mixed the sauce and began to hot-pot the mutton. He picked up a thin piece of fat lamb and dipped it into the boiling pot. Then, he scooped it up and placed it in the sauce. While the meat was still smoking, he quickly ate it. He chewed lightly. It was tender and juicy. The fragrance lingered in his mouth. It was really delicious. Jun Yixie's stomach growled as he watched. He covered it awkwardly. Gu pretended not to see it. After dipping a few more slices, he said with a satisfied expression, the taste is just right. Prince Kong, do you want to try it? Naturally, Jun Yixie wouldn't ask for food of his own accord. He was waiting for these exact words. He was overjoyed. I'll do as you say. Gu then broke a pair of chopsticks into two. I'll make do with it. He only brought a pair of chopsticks. Jun Yixie thought that this guy probably wasn't here for him. Of course, Jun Yixie was still cautious. No matter how hungry he was, he still took extra care to make sure the meat wasn't poisonous before eating it. Once he started eating, he really couldn't stop. Soon enough, the two of them had cleaned out the entire pot of rice and hot pot mutton. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Jun Yixie asked, has this brother heard of the war between Northern Li and Tianning? From what Jun Yixie understood of the Northern Dynasty's emperors, the Northern Dynasty's emperors would definitely strike back after Long Fei Ye's provocation. They'd put pressure on Emperor Tianhui, so there was no way they'd remain silent until now. Gu leaned lazily against a tree trunk and arched an eyebrow at Jun Yixie. Smiling coldly, he said, this young master has never been interested in the affairs of the imperial court. Jun Yixie knitted his brows. This guy's attitude was clearly off. What did he mean by that? Gu's eyes grew even colder. This young master is more interested in you. Jun Yixie immediately went on guard. He glanced at the leftover food and knew it was a trap, but he was sure it wasn't poisonous. Besides Han Yunshi, who else in the world had better poison skills than him? Just who are you? Why have you come? He asked coldly. Gu slowly spat out two words. Bear Chuan. Jun Yixie grew even more stunned at his words, but he didn't show it. Instead, he asked coldly, what's a bear Chuan? You don't know? Gu laughed. Never heard of it. Jun Yixie denied. How could he not know what bear Chuan was? It was an extremely rare and precious medicinal ingredient that was used not to treat illnesses, but to create antidotes. He'd spent a lot of effort and money to get his hands on it. Where did this guy find out that bear Chuan was in his hands? What kind of poison did he want from bear Chuan? Jun Yixie denied it, but Gu wasn't in a hurry to argue with him. He didn't say anything and just watched with interest. Jun Yixie couldn't stay calm after eating such a delicious meal. He frowned and almost made a move, but he quickly remembered the rules of Fishery Island. What do you want? He said angrily. Gu's eyes turned vicious. He said word by word, hand over the bear Chuan, and I'll give you the antidote. Otherwise. Jun Yixie was puzzled. Judging from this guy's attitude, he seemed to have an irreconcilable grudge against him. He'd offended many people, including those who'd killed their parents, wives, and entire families. Who was this guy? Although he felt guilty, his aura was still very strong. He glanced at him disdainfully. Otherwise what? Unexpectedly, before he could finish his sentence, his stomach began to cramp. The pain didn't increase gradually, but became very intense all of a sudden. His entire stomach felt like it was burning. Would Gu Qixiao's own poisons be simple? Even though Jun Yixie was a man, he couldn't help but frown. Of course, in addition to the pain, his heart was already in a perilous situation. This meal was really poisonous. Not only did he fail to test it out, but he also couldn't figure out what kind of poison it was when the poison took effect. For him, the leader of the 100 Poisons sect and the leader of the poison world, to be defeated in his field of expertise was simply a great insult. One Han Yunshi was enough. Where did this thing come from? Jun Yixia endured the pain and said angrily, "Who are you?" Gu was still standing there lazily. He casually plucked a weed and played with it in his hand. After a while, he faintly spat out 2 words, "Bear, Chuan, I didn't." Jun Yixia sternly denied. Gu shrugged and rested for a while. Then, he took out a packet of lamb slices and dipped them in it. He was enjoying himself with relish. In just a while, Jun Yixia was already in so much pain that he couldn't stand it anymore. He clutched his stomach and bent over. However, it wasn't that easy to get him to hand over the bear Chuan. He had to endure. "I'm going to fish for lobsters. If your Highness Majesty Kong thinks it through, you can come to me for the antidote at any time," Goose said with a smile. Yuzhou Island prohibited martial arts, but there were no drugs. As long as he didn't poison the fish in the lake, who could do anything to him? If he didn't use Jun Yixia's expertise in poison, he might not be able to trick him. Under Jun Yixia's vicious glare, Gu Qishao picked up his fishing rod and hummed a little tune as he headed for the illusory sea lake. He was planning to catch a few giant lobsters to nourish his poison lass's body. The end of spring and the beginning of summer was the best time to nourish her body. As soon as Gu left, Jun Yixia was so angry that he kicked over the boiler. Damn it! Was he having bad luck recently? Could any random person mess with him? There was no way he would hand over the bear Chuan. Jun Yixia sat down under a tree and clutched his stomach tightly to calm himself down. He didn't believe that he couldn't get rid of the poison in his body. Unfortunately, after pondering and enduring for a few hours, Jun Yixia still came up empty-handed. He sat on the ground and was in so much pain that he couldn't even straighten his back. At that moment, the poison in his shoulder flared up. Jun Yixia fell to the ground. After a moment of silence, he couldn't take it anymore and started rolling on the ground. Pain could be fatal. Many people in the world had died from the pain. When he realized that his life was in danger, Jun Yixia finally compromised. He struggled to walk to the illusory sea lake, too weak to speak. He raised the bear Chuan with trembling hands and gestured to Gu. "Oh, you've thought it through." Gu laughed. "Give me the antidote first." Jun Yixia finally opened his mouth. His face was pale and covered in cold sweat. "Do you think you have the right to negotiate with me?" Gu retorted cold. Jun Yixia was unwilling, but he couldn't do anything about it. He threw the bear Chuan over. Gu caught it. After confirming that it was genuine, he was very happy. He glanced back at Jun Yixia with a smile that could topple cities. I forgot to bring the antidote." Chapter 437. Did he forget to bring the antidote? How was that possible? Most poison users and doctors had the habit of carrying their own medicine with them, especially poison users. They would definitely carry their antidotes with them. Take him for example. Forget about poisons and antidotes, he would even carry some of the most expensive medicinal herbs with him to prevent them from being stolen. Bear Chuan was an example. This masked man in black was clearly doing this on purpose. "You're messing with me." Jun Yixia was so angry that he temporarily forgot about his stomach pain. Gu actually admitted it openly. "Yes, I'm messing with you." "So what?" "You." Jun Yixia was so angry that he clenched his fists and almost punched him. Unfortunately, he could not be impulsive. On Fishery Island, impulsiveness was the devil. Impulsiveness had the price of one's life. The curse of dying an unnatural death had come true countless times. Junyi Xia endured the pain and suppressed his anger. He asked breathlessly, "What exactly do you want?" Gu sighed softly. "Sigh, nothing much. I'm just here to mess with you. Go to hell." Junyi Xia was so angry that he raised his fist. It was about to hit Gu's face, but in the end, it hit the ground hard and he fell to his knees. He had never been so aggrieved in his life. He had originally wanted to take advantage of Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi by taking advantage of Fishery Island's prohibition of martial arts. Who would have thought that he would be defeated by this rule in the end? He was angry. He was so angry that his internal organs were burning. To the bad-tempered Junyi Xia, being unable to vent his anger was the greatest torture. "Your Highness Kong Majesty, anger hurts the liver. Your stomach is already in bad condition. You must take care of your liver." Gu smiled and ignored Junyi Xia's fist. He turned around and continued fishing for lobsters. Junyi Xia knelt on one knee. He was in so much pain that his back was drenched in cold sweat. He looked at Gu's back and really could not figure out what this guy was trying to do. He had already gotten the bear chuan. Could it be that he wanted something else? The pain in his stomach was getting worse and worse, and it was almost at its limit. Perhaps he would faint from the pain, or even die from it. He still had a lot of things to do. He still had great ambitions to fulfill. How could he die in such a sullen manner? He couldn't accept it. Judging from the attitude of this masked man in black, he didn't seem to really want to kill him. Otherwise, he could have just directly poisoned him. What was the point of talking so much nonsense? Propping up his tired and aching body, Junyi Xia forced himself to walk to Gu Qishao's side. He took a few deep breaths to calm himself down. He thought that this guy would be amenable to coaxing but not coercion. If he lowered himself and negotiated with him properly, there might still be a chance for a turnaround. A real man knows when to yield and when to stand tall. It wouldn't be too late to deal with this guy after his poison was cured. Junyi Xia said patiently, "Brother, if you have something to say, why don't you just say it so that you don't waste everyone's time?" Gu Qishao ignored him and focused on the fishing rod. Junyi Xia took a few deep breaths to ease the pain. He then said, "Brother, if you have any requests, just say it. I believe that you are a straightforward person." "Sure. The lobster is about to take the bait," Gu whispered. Junyi Xia was in so much pain that he couldn't care less about the lobster. However, he had a request, so he could only bear with it and keep quiet for the time being. But Gu Qishao started chatting with him instead. "Your Highness Sanfuwa Majesty, have you ever fished for lobsters?" His tone was as if nothing had happened between the two of them. "I haven't." Junyi Xia endured the pain and answered reluctantly. Generally speaking, this kind of large lobster needs to be caught. However, the lobsters in the illusory sea lake must be fished because the large lobsters here are as stupid as the small lobsters in the river. As long as they bite the bait and eat it, they won't let it go easily. Gu explained patiently. Junyi Xia was not in the mood to listen. Just as he was about to speak, Gu stopped him. The fishing line was pulled taut. The lobster had taken the bait. Gu waited for a moment to make sure that the lobster had started to eat the bait. He slowly pulled the line back to the shore and prepared the fish funnel. Then, he lifted the fishing line and used the funnel to catch the lobster. What a big lobster! The two pincers were as big as a palm. Gu was overjoyed. He laughed heartily. "TSK, TSK, TSK. Such a big one. It must be very nutritious." As he spoke, he placed the large lobster in an ice bucket and stored it well. He couldn't be careless when it came to nutritious things for poison lass. Junisia sat at the side, clutching his stomach. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. He had lost all hope, he had forgotten all about being flexible and being amenable to coaxing but not coercion. He only wanted a quick end. What do you want in exchange for the antidote? Tell me. This prince can afford to lose. He roared angrily. Gu looked back and gave him a disdainful glance. Wait. I'll tell you when I catch another too. The pain in your stomach won't kill you. What are you afraid of? Although the poison in his stomach was not fatal, from Junisia's experience, it was a slow and fatal poison. To put it bluntly, it was a pain that could kill or starve a person to death. Could it be that he had guessed wrongly? All right, this prince will wait. He gave in again. Unfortunately, Gu did not catch a single lobster for the following day and night. The difficulty of catching lobsters in the illusory sea lake was not a joke. For the entire day and night, Junisia's stomach was in a constant state of pain. Not to mention eating, he even vomited out water. Junisia, who was already in a sorry state, was tormented by the pain and hunger until he was neither human nor ghost. He had never dreamed that he would have such a day. He finally began to feel regret. If he had known earlier, he would not have. Gu was extremely relaxed. He fixed the fishing rod and then set up a stove by the lake. He even used 2 pots. One was cooking, the other. He was actually cooking the mouth-watering red braised pork. Seriously, enough. After cooking, he scooped a bowl of rice and covered it with the red braised pork before placing it in front of Junisia. Here. Don't worry, eat it. It's not poisonous. Finally, Junisia could not take it anymore. He fiercely pulled it out and roared, "Fuck you, what do you want? If you want to kill me, do it." Gu was not angry and asked seriously, "It's very fragrant. Are you sure you don't want to eat it?" Junisia felt like he had punched cotton. He was angry to death, but it did not matter to others. He was so angry that a breath of air was stuck in his chest, neither going up nor down, and he almost fainted. Even though he didn't know who this guy was, he was sure that this guy was the best of the best. The worst of the worst. Forget it if you don't want to eat. Gu Qishao shrugged his shoulders and retreated to sit down. He began to eat with relish before continuing to fish for lobsters. Junisia looked on helplessly, unable to say a word. Finally, on the 3rd day, Gu caught 3 large lobsters. Junisia collapsed by the lake because of the excessive pain. He was 30% unconscious and 70% awake. Gu packed the 3 lobsters and kicked the remaining ingredients into the illusory sea lake to feed the fish. Only then did he walk towards Junisia. Junisia was so tired that he did not have the strength to get up. He was already in despair and only had one question. You. Who exactly are you? This prince and you. What enmity do we have? He was not sure if he would die, but if he died, he had to know who killed him. Otherwise, how could he rest in peace? Gu walked closer and deliberately leaned in close to Junisia. He suddenly lifted his mask. Your Highness Sanfawaduk, long time no see. Junisia was very surprised to see this gorgeous and flirtatious face. He was stunned for a while before he said angrily, Gu, it's you. It's this young master. Gu said with a smile. You. Junisia roared angrily. What, are you going to bite me? Gu smiled even more brilliantly. His narrowed eyes were as bright as the stars in the sky. This prince has no enmity with you. What do you mean by that? Junisia still did not understand. At this moment, the smile in Gu's eyes stopped abruptly and was replaced by a sinister and ruthless expression. He changed his face faster than flipping a book. No one could imagine that a person who smiled so brilliantly could have such a ruthless and cruel side. He narrowed his eyes and said coldly, "Because Han Yunshi. This young master will kill anyone who hurts her without mercy." When he said this, Jun Xia actually laughed loudly. What a joke, what a pity. Gu, you've taken a fancy to that married woman, haven't you? Nonsense, isn't it obvious? Gu asked with a sneer. Jun Xia wanted to attack him, but there was no way. Jun Xia's pale lips curled into a mocking smile. If you have the ability, go fight with Long Fei Yi. Why are you trying to be a hero in front of this prince? This young master likes to be a hero in front of you, so what? Oh, right, this young master forgot to tell you. There's still one more day before your stomach starts to fester. It'll spread to your internal organs in half a day. As Gu spoke, he stood up and sighed with emotion. Sigh. It's such a pity that the dignified Duke of Kong, the sect master of the 100 Poison sect, is going to die on Fishery Island just like that. Jun Xia had always been hoping that the poison in his stomach would be fatal, but who knew that it would actually be fatal? Gu! How dare you! He struggled to stand up, but soon fell to his knees again. He had been tortured to the point where he had no strength left. Even if he were to risk everything and violate the taboo of Fishery Island and perish together with Gu, he was powerless to do so. Gu glanced at him disdainfully and said, "Just wait for your death." So speaking, he picked up the 3 giant lobsters on his back and left without looking back. Actually, he wanted to play with Jun Xia for a few more days, but he caught the lobsters faster than planned. He had to deliver them to Poison Lass before they were still fresh. Nothing was more important than that. Come to think of it, it had been a long time since he'd visited Tianning's capital city to see his Poison Lass. That day, Gu Qishao heartlessly left Fishery Island, leaving Jun Xia to struggle at death's door by himself as he hovered on the brink of death. However, to everyone's surprise, fog suddenly appeared on the sea around Fishing Boat Island that night. Judging from the location of the island, there was only one type of fog that would appear here, topographic fog. Although visibility was low, it didn't last long. The Bailey Navy had been guarding the island for 3 months, so they were naturally prepared to deal with the fog. As soon as the fog appeared, they immediately increased their illumination and increased their defenses around the island's coastline. The Bailey Navy's only job was to keep an eye on the shoreline and prevent Jun Xia from leaving. Thus, it wasn't much of a problem under these conditions. But who would have thought that this fog was actually poisonous? Chapter 438. The fog was very similar to the ones that had appeared before. It enveloped Fishery Island and the sea around it. The Bailey Navy's defenses were in order. Every movement along the shoreline of Fishery Island was under surveillance, whether it was on land or in the sea. But soon, something strange happened. The sentries on the decks of several warships suddenly fainted. The doctor on board was shocked when he arrived. This is bad. The fog is poisonous. This is a sign of poisoning, but the toxicity is unknown. Bailey Yuchi, the 3rd son of Bailey DeLong, who was sitting on the main warship, slapped his thigh when he heard the news. This is bad. The sea was so wide and it wasn't a canyon or a place with special airflow. It couldn't have been a natural poison fog. In other words, this poison fog was man-made. Jun Xia was an expert in poisons and had the powerful 100 Poison sect behind him. In the end, trapping Jun Xia was different from trapping anyone else. In the past, he and his father had asked Qin Wangfei about the poison attack. Esteemed Wang Fei had said that Junie Xie and the 100 Poison sect had no way of attacking the navy in such a wide expanse of water. Moreover, the navy had surrounded Fishery Island and was a certain distance away from it. The sea between them was a natural barrier. Even if Junie Xie had a powerful poison, he couldn't use it. In short, esteemed Wang Fei told them not to worry. But who would have thought that something like this would happen 3 months later? Third Master, it can't be the 100 Poison sect. Could it be that some expert has come to save Junie Xie? Lieutenant General Zhua said anxiously. If the 100 Poison sect had the ability to attack with poison, why would they wait for so long and let Junie Xie suffer so much? No matter who it is, they're in big trouble. The Bailey Navy was completely defenseless against poison attacks. Bailey Yuchi panicked, but he made a prompt decision to sound the alarm and put all the warships on alert. He ordered all the crew to wear masks and burn mugwort in an attempt to disperse the poison fog. He personally wrote the letter and used the eagle his father had left him, hoping to deliver the news to His Highness Duke of Qin and esteemed Wang Fei as soon as possible. But who would have thought that not long after, the poisonous fog would cover the entire fleet? As soon as the eagle flew out, it quickly fell into the sea. Bailey Yuchi's heart sank when he saw this. In this situation, the news could not be sent out for the time being. The mask seemed to be ineffective. Many of the sentries on the deck fainted. Fortunately, their lives were not in danger. Third Young Master, what should we do? Should we close the cabin? The Deputy General asked. At the front line were the sentries, followed by the archers. Presumably, it wouldn't be long before the archers were poisoned as well. The poisonous fog was everywhere, and the only way to escape was to hide in the cabin, close the doors and windows, and wait for the poisonous fog to disperse. As soon as the Deputy General said this, Bailey Yuchi immediately slapped him. Bastard! Aren't we being trampled on? If they retreated, not only would Junie Xie escape, the ship would also be destroyed. The Deputy General rubbed his head. Although he was afraid, he had no choice but to ask, then what should we do now? If they didn't hide, they would be exposed to the poisonous fog. Who knew how many people would faint and how long they would be unconscious for? It was undeniable that poison was a terrifying skill, and a large-scale poison attack was even more terrifying. It could almost destroy an entire army. Bailey Yuchi had no choice but to cast a questioning glance at the 2 military doctors beside him. Third Young Master, this subordinate's guess is that the poisonous fog doesn't seem to be highly toxic. Dr. Li was very cautious, but Dr. Chen decisively said, in this subordinate's opinion, the poisonous fog isn't highly toxic, and it won't cause everyone to be poisoned. It's very likely that it's just a bluff. What do you mean? Bailey Yuchi hurriedly asked. Esteemed Wang Fei said that the sea around Fishery Island is very special. The sea breeze is very smooth, and the ocean currents are very smooth. It's very difficult to poison people in the sea or in the air. Even she can't do it. This subordinate's guess is that the poisonous fog won't last for long and will disperse very soon. Based on the current situation, less than 10 people have fainted from the poison, and the signs of poisoning are only fainting. It's clear that the poison isn't highly toxic. It's unlikely that they'll lose their lives, Dr. Chen analyzed in detail. Bailey Yuchi had more or less considered the same thing, so he was even more certain after hearing Dr. Chen's words. He immediately ordered, men, pass on this general's order. The poisonous fog isn't fatal. It'll disperse very soon, so don't panic. Send more men to keep an eye on Fishery Island. After calming down the troops and increasing their defenses, Bailey Yuchi went down to the cabin alone. A group of very professional navy was stationed at the bottom of the main warship, the Mermaid Army. Although there weren't many mermaids, they were the true Bailey Navy. They were familiar with everything in the sea and could live freely in the sea. They were the Bailey clan's honor and representative, as well as the clan's most secret power. Bailey Yuchi handed the secret letter he'd written to a mermaid soldier and instructed seriously, "You must deliver this to my master as soon as possible." Naturally, he was referring to His Highness Duke of Qin, whom the Bailey Navy was loyal to. Understood. The mermaid soldier obeyed and dove into the sea. Even if the eagles were blocked, there was still a way out in the sea. The poisoner probably couldn't guard against that. Very soon, the mermaid soldiers left Fishery Island and headed towards Cloud Realm continent. But things weren't looking good for the Bailey Navy. Dr. Chen's guesses weren't entirely correct. The poisonous fog really wasn't lethal, but it took a long time to disperse. Almost 2 hours had passed since the fog appeared. More and more soldiers fainted, and more archers fell to the ground. As time went on, more and more of the poisoned soldiers and archers were poisoned. Although they were able to fill in the gaps in time, there were still gaps. Towards the end, even Bailey Yuchi began to feel uncomfortable. Although he didn't want to go back to the cabin, he couldn't collapse as a deputy general. He quickly returned to his cabin and took a few puffs of mugwort tobacco before feeling better. "Third young master, if this keeps up, we won't have enough men." As soon as General Zhou finished speaking, another general rushed over with a report. "Third young master, it's bad." 2 of the archers retreated into the cabin. Bailey Yuchi grew alarmed. "Drag them out and execute them in front of everyone." In the army, the worst taboo wasn't losing, but shrinking back. This was especially true at a critical moment like this. As soon as someone shrank back, it would shake the morale of the entire army. Once that happened, even the strongest army would fall apart. "They've already been executed, but those cowards are all asking when the poison fog will disperse," General Zhou said helplessly. The fact that the fog hadn't dispersed for so long made the soldiers suspicious. They even began to question the poison's lethality. Ignoring his discomfort, Bailey Yuchi strode forward and roared, "Soldiers are trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment. What's the point of having such cowardly cowards at a time like this? I'm telling you now, if you want to retreat, this old man will personally kill you and feed you to the fishes. Brothers who can hold on, the Bailey army and His Highness Duke of Qin won't treat you unfairly." His words restored much of the soldiers' morale. But they couldn't do without morale, nor could they do without it. The Bailey Navy held on for a full 4 hours. It was almost dawn, but the poison fog still hadn't dispersed. A large number of archers and Navy soldiers had already lost consciousness. The remaining troops weren't enough to defend Fishery Island. Bailey Yuchi had long since gone to Fishery Island. Even if he couldn't defend the shoreline, he could at least protect Jun Xia. Unfortunately, he hadn't even found Jun Xia before he fainted in the coconut grove on Fishery Island. If Jun Xia was still awake, he would have been shocked by the poison fog as well. Unfortunately, he'd already been rescued and was lying on a mysterious fishing boat far away from Fishery Island, heading in the direction of Northernly. A mysterious expert had unknowingly rescued him long ago. The poison fog gradually dissipated at daybreak. The Navy and archers gradually regained consciousness, including Bailey Yuchi. They quickly discovered traces of a ship on the shoal of the harbor. Jun Xia had been rescued. Bailey Yuchi stared blankly for a moment, then rushed back to the main warship's cabin and shouted angrily, "Didn't I tell you last night to guard the sea?" The mermaid soldiers guarded the surface of the sea. As long as a ship appeared, they were to capsize it. "Third young master, that person's ship is poisonous. Wherever it goes, the seawater will be contaminated. We can't approach it at all. We've already sent people to follow it, but we can only follow it from afar. Without His Highness Duke of Qin's orders, we don't dare to show ourselves, the mermaid captain replied helplessly. He was right. Mermaids had a special status. They couldn't even show their faces, let alone fight. Following them from afar was already their bottom line. If they were discovered, the losses would outweigh the gains. Bailey Yuchi's anger subsided. He sighed repeatedly. I can only blame myself for not finding Jun Yixia sooner. Third young master, the newcomer's poison skills are extremely high. I doubt even esteemed Wang Fei would be a match for him, the mermaid captain said seriously. Bailey Yuchi didn't have time to think too much. He immediately wrote down the situation and sent a messenger pigeon back. After trapping Jun Yixia for 3 months, Jun Yixia was about to go crazy from exhaustion. But he'd actually escaped in a single night. He didn't know how His Highness Duke of Qin and esteemed Wang Fei would react when they received this news. The mermaid soldier who delivered the secret letter was still on the way, and so was the messenger pigeon. Even Gu, who'd given Jun Yixia a hard time, was still on his way back. He was counting on his fingers to calculate when Jun Yixia would die from the poison. How could he have imagined that Jun Yixia would rescue him less than half a day after he'd left? At this time, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi were also completely unaware of this. After Long Fei Yi returned to the Duke of Qin's estate from the Medicine Ghost Valley, he investigated the matter of the furnace explosion. Bailey Mingxiang was still recuperating in his room, while Han Yunxi was in the study studying the charcoal ashes. After Long Fei Yi analyzed the situation with her, he said coldly, "If it's not Zhao Mama, then it's Su Xiaoyu. In this prince's opinion, that little girl is the most suspicious. Your Highness, if the explosion was man-made, then Su Xiaoyu is most likely the culprit. However, we still can't be sure if the explosion was an accident or man-made," Han Yunxi said seriously. She had already secretly instructed Su Donglin to keep a close eye on Su Xiaoyu and Zhao Mama. Although she had her suspicions, she didn't want to wrongly accuse someone without sufficient evidence. She had tasted the feeling of being wrongly accused many times. Long Fei Yi glanced at the charcoal ashes and his tone became even colder. Must you go through so much trouble? This woman had been analyzing these dirty things for several days. Didn't she find it annoying? I've already thought of a way. Give me another 2 or 3 days. I'll definitely be able to prove whether it was an accident or man-made. Han Yunxi was very confident. Although Long Fei Yi wasn't willing and didn't have the patience, he finally obeyed Han Yunxi and even stayed in the study with her all day long. However, a day later, the mermaid soldier's secret letter arrived. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi were both shocked. They were about to rush to Yuzhou Island and the messenger pigeon arrived. After Long Fei Yi finished reading the letter, his face, which had been warm for 2 days, completely turned cold. Jun Yixia has been rescued. Chapter 439. Jun Yixia was rescued. Han Yunxi was stunned by Long Fei Yi's words. When did this happen? The night of the poison fog. Long Fei Yi showed Han Yunxi the letter delivered by flying pigeon. Han Yunxi's expression grew heavy as soon as she finished reading. Your Highness, whoever rescued Jun Yixia must be a poison expert. I'm afraid even I wouldn't be able to deal with him. Long Fei Yi naturally knew of his opponent's skills, but he was still surprised by Han Yunxi's words. As far as he knew, the woman by his side was Cloud Realm Continent's top poisons master. It's impossible for an ordinary person to control such a large amount of poison fog, Han Yunxi remarked. When she read the first letter, she thought that Jun Yixia might not have been able to escape despite the poison fog. Because of the natural conditions of Fishery Island, it was already unthinkable for a man-made poison fog to appear. To maintain the fog's duration and control its toxicity was even more impossible. She assumed that the Bailey Navy would be able to hold out against the fog. But Juni Xie was rescued that very night. As a top poisons master herself, she couldn't imagine that the poison fog could have been controlled by someone else. What kind of person was the manipulator? Long Fei Ye's expression was gloomy the entire time. If not for Fishery Island's rules forbidding martial arts, he would have killed Juni Xie long ago. Why would he waste so much effort? After being trapped for 3 months, he had planned to keep Juni Xie trapped until he died. Who knew something like this would happen instead? After pacing a few steps in the courtyard, Long Fei Yi couldn't suppress his rage any longer. He punched the wall and roared, "Juni Xie, your lordship will make you pay an even greater price." Han Yunxi's rage vanished at the sight of this furious man. Instead, she felt like laughing. It was actually a kind of happiness to see the person you liked get angry because of you. Of course, Han Yunxi didn't dare to laugh out loud. She didn't dare to let Long Fei Yi know what she was thinking. "Your Highness, we still have to make a trip. I'll go take a look at those poisoned marines," Han Yunxi said seriously. Long Fei Yi just nodded. He was so unhappy that he didn't say anything. They had no choice but to set aside the matter of the furnace explosion for now. After instructing Chu Shifeng to keep a close eye on Su Xiaoyu and Zhao Mama, Long Fei Yi took Han Yunxi and left the capital for Fishery Island. He would naturally deal with Juni Xie in the future, but the most important thing right now was to figure out what was going on with that poisonous fog and who exactly saved Juni Xie. It was not a good thing that Juni Xie had the help of such an expert. After hearing that His Highness Duke of Qin and esteemed Wang Fei were going on a long journey, Su Xiaoyu was thrilled. She finally had a chance to go out. But her heart withered as soon as she saw Chu Shifeng outside the leisurely cloud pavilion. She couldn't go out. Ever since the furnace explosion, she hadn't found a chance to leave the estate. She had agreed to meet her master in the middle of the month, but now it was the end of the month and she still hadn't reported back. She couldn't even send word out. If she knew this would happen, she wouldn't have been so impulsive. Although His Highness Duke of Qin and esteemed Wang Fei hadn't mentioned the explosion recently, she still felt uneasy. Especially after His Highness Duke of Qin's return, she felt even more fearful. She really wanted to run away, but that would expose her identity. Moreover, she might not be able to escape. She had no choice but to keep waiting and think of a way out. Currently, Chu Tianyin was waiting for Su Xiaoyu angrily. "Young master, why don't this subordinate go take a look at the Duke of Qin's estate tonight?" the guard asked in a low voice. Chu Tianyin immediately kicked him. "Idiot, do you think the Duke of Qin's estate is a place you can visit? If it was that easy, he would have gone long ago. Why wait here?" Su Xiaoyu wasn't the type to be late, so she must have gotten caught up in something important at the Duke of Qin's estate. Although Chu Tianyin was anxious, all he could do was wait. As a last resort, he could only abandon Su Xiaoyu as a chess piece. This time, he had an important mission in Tianning's capital city. He couldn't afford to lose sight of the big picture for the sake of small gains and alert the snake in the grass. Once their identities were suspected, everything would be over. The guard silently crawled to his feet, not daring to utter a peep. Soon enough, Chu Qingge arrived. Under Chu Tiannin's tutelage, Chu Qingge had already turned all of the servants in her palace into docile, loyal servants. She'd even gotten on good terms with eunuch Luo, Emperor Tianhui's personal guard. Today, she'd borrowed the chance to leave the palace to pay respects to Buddha to sneak in here. "Big bro, you guessed right. Noble Consort Shui, that slut, slandered me in Tianhui's ear last night. Eunuch Luo told me everything," Chu Qingge said hatefully. Tianhui's already doted on noble Consort Shui, but but he still hasn't gone to your palace. Chu Tianyin creased his brows. Emperor Tianhui liked Chu Qingge very much, but he still hadn't doted on her yet. At the mention of this, Chu Qingge's eyes turned red. This was the last thing she wanted to face. Fortunately, Emperor Tianhui had just recovered from a serious illness when she married into the family. He was still recuperating from his illness and couldn't make love to her. Moreover, Emperor Tianhui cherished his life and had strong self-control when it came to his health. Of course, Emperor Tianhui would recover eventually, but Chu Qingge didn't want to dwell on this nightmare for now. After a while, Chu Qingge replied unhappily, "It was that slut who went to the imperial study to deliver ginseng soup. She forcefully kept him company for a while, but Tianhui cherished his life so much that he didn't touch her." Besides Gu Beiyue, which other imperial physician is familiar with Tianhui's condition? Chu Tianyin asked. Of course, he wasn't asking Chu Qingge, but the advisor by his side. Last time Chu Tianyin had returned to Tianning's capital, he'd made plenty of preparations and found a few advisors familiar with Tianning's imperial court. Tianhui's always used Gu Beiyue. When Gu Beiyue asked for leave, he recommended an imperial physician Huang. As this one understands, noble consort Shui tried to bribe him multiple times, but was tactfully refused every time. The advisor replied immediately. "I'll try," Chu Qingge said immediately. Chu Tianyin glared at her unhappily. "How many times have I told you to think thrice before you speak?" Chu Qingge shut her mouth resentfully. Actually, her heart was filled with displeasure. She didn't want to marry, much less serve as a chess piece, but her father had long given her a death sentence. With her father's personality, she'd be done for the rest of her life if she refused. She comforted herself by telling herself that she'd at least have a chance to take revenge on Han Yunxi. At least she could see the Duke of Qin. Her father and big brother both said that the Chu clan wanted Tianning's throne, but she always felt that things weren't that simple. She'd asked them countless times, but neither of them had said much. She was too lazy to ask either. She'd agree to any of her big brother's requests, but anything that involved Han Yunxi, no way. "I'll take care of Imperial Physician Huang. Qingge, has Mu Luiyue come looking for you recently?" Chu Tianyin asked next. "No," Chu Qingge denied immediately. "Did she or didn't she?" Chu Tianyin asked again. "Yes. She came looking for me just yesterday," Chu Qingge said angrily. Mu Luiyue came looking for her every 2 to 3 days to discuss how to deal with Han Yunxi. Although all of her suggestions were idiotic, Chu Qingge still cherished having a comrade in the palace who hated a common enemy. Mu Luiyue is one of Empress Dowager Li's chess pieces. "Don't tell her about us," Chu Tianyin said seriously. "And also, I'll warn you one last time. Don't waste your time on Qin Wangfei. She comes looking for me every day to talk about Han Yunxi. Am I supposed to chase her out?" Chu Qingge retorted coldly. Chu Tianyin laughed disdainfully. "Keep messing around for now. When the time is right, see how your big brother uses this crown prince consort to topple Empress Dowager Li." Chu Qingge nodded. Of course she believed that her big brother had the skills. As for his warning, she'd simply ignored it. A storm was brewing in Tianning's imperial harem. It was impossible to predict whether Han Yunxi would be dragged into it again. At the very least, she'd never considered any of the women in Emperor Tianhui's harem worthy of her attention. A few days after leaving Tianning's capital city, she and Long Feiyi finally set sail out to sea. The Bailey Navy hadn't retreated, so news of Jun Yixie's escape was still unknown to everyone, including Gu. Gu had already come ashore and disappeared with the bear Chuan. Mu Ling was close to tears trying to find him. As for Jun Yixie, he was still unconscious. On the vast seas, an unremarkable fishing boat bobbed along with the waves. None of the ships passing by gave it a second glance, thinking it was just an ordinary fishing boat returning from the open seas. But Dreamy Chapters was lying in the cabin of the boat. A yellow-robed girl was sitting by his side, inserting needles into his shoulder. She looked to be around 16 or 17 years old, petite and thin. Her large eyes seemed to speak with their own eyes, giving her a very strange appearance. Once she was done, she hugged her knees and waited on one side. But soon enough, she couldn't sit still any longer and pinched Dreamy Chapters' nose. "Senior brother, we're almost ashore. It's time to wake up." Dreamy Chapters was already in a daze and was about to wake up. His breathing stopped, and he immediately opened his eyes. He looked at the yellow-robed girl in confusion and slowly closed his eyes. But soon, he opened them again and cried out in surprise, "Yu Qiao." Bai Yu Qiao chuckled. Instead of letting go, he pinched Dreamy Chapters' nose even harder. Dreamy Chapters unceremoniously opened the bag, touched his stomach, looked around, and immediately got up and walked out of the cabin. He knew he had left Fishery Island, and the poison in his stomach had been cured. "Where's Master?" Dreamy Chapters asked coldly. He knew Bai Yu Qiao didn't have the ability to save him from Fishery Island, nor did he have the ability to cure the poison in his stomach. But there was one person who could definitely do it, and that was his father's ally, the former leader of the 100 Poisons sect, Bai Qingyan. When he was 3 years old, his father died of illness and entrusted him to Bai Qingyan. Bai Qingyan took him as his disciple and treated him as his own. But when he was 13, Bai Qingyan disappeared after handing him over to the Northern Dynasty's emperors. He had searched for him over the years, but there was no news. He never expected that his master would come to his rescue at this time. Presumably, his master had been keeping an eye on him. Bai Yu Qiao was his master's adopted daughter, and his junior sister. This little girl was young, but she was quite capable. She had matured early since she was a child. Usually, when he wasn't in the 100 Poisons sect, she could manage it well. "Master said you were almost poisoned to death and humiliated him. He doesn't want to see you." Bai Yu Qiao chuckled and asked, "Senior brother, who poisoned your shoulder? Let me tell you a secret. Even Master can't cure the poison. He took some blood back to study it." You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.